Uh, uh, for tonight's meeting, our agenda will go as follows. We'll again have public input remotely with the email address at schoolcommittee@reading.k12.ma.us. Public input, which should be pertaining to matters that are not on the agenda. And then if there's questions on agenda items, residents can use that same email address to send in questions. So that's our public comment. Then we'll have a consent agenda, reports, and then we're gonna have a little discussion on the retreat and a revisit conversation on the social media policy, a report from staff on the where we are with the fall opening, and I'm going to take the next two things out of order in the agenda. So I would like to start with the MASC resolution as the first new business, have that discussion and vote. And then after that, have the discussion on racial equality. So having said that, I'm going to do a roll call vote. Sean?
Here.
John?
Here.
Tom?
Here.
Aaron?
Here.
And Carla?
Here.
And Chuck is here. And from staff, we have Dr. Doherty, Assistant Superintendent Kelly, Human Resources Director Jen Allard, Assistant Linda Engelson, CFO Gail Dowd, Student Services Dr. Stiles, and again, we're very thankful for the work that Paul continues to do. And I would also shout out to our technology department that I'm not sure exactly who did it, but and I know Sharilla will be very pleased. They brought a laptop into her in Boston to use tonight. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Just so that the technology wouldn't be a problem for her. So having said that, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Sean. Any questions, comments?
Chuck,
Yes.
sorry, not using the thing on the side. Apologies. Just a couple of quick adjustments or amendments I'd like to make to a couple of the minutes there. First, I would say that the minutes from, trying to find the date, sorry, it's long minutes. Minutes from 6/22. I'd like to add a note in particular that the curriculum presentation, our acceptance of it meant that we accepted the middle school math curriculum materials that were chosen and the Algebra 1 curriculum materials that were chosen. That's not explicitly called out in those minutes. And then the other one I would say is a little bit further down, right above E Old Business, where it says Ms. Gaffin and Mrs. Nazaro volunteered to work. I also did volunteer to work with Ms. Dowd and yourself to develop the evaluation rubric tool.
Okay.
And I can submit those to Ms. Engelson for full and official at the time.
Would the committee accept that as a friendly amendment? Seeing yes.
Yes.
We'll have a roll call vote. Carla?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Chuck? Aye. Thank you. So now we'll have reports. I don't believe there's any staff reports tonight. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So we'll have committee reports. John Parks, do you have anything?
We did have an ad hoc meeting last week. We went over some possible avenues of approach to starting out. I think Sean can fill in what I'm missing, but we're waiting to hear back for the next scheduled meeting.
Okay, thank you. Carla?
No report. Thank you.
Tom?
No report here either.
Aaron?
No report.
And Sean?
Yeah, just to add on a little bit to what John said, where the ad hoc Human Rights Committee sits is that there is a series of questions that came back from a discussion with the library folks back in January, and the ad hoc committee is working on responses to those questions so that we can get the ball rolling on something potentially to put in front of town meeting this fall.
Okay, thank you. And I do not have any report. So now we can go to the retreat planning. So I believe we have that on the calendar for the August 12th.
August 13th.
I mean the 13th. And I'll just get it started. I think what the original intent of that was to have a discussion on the goals for the upcoming term and such, and just have the committee involved in that with staff. So, does anybody have anything they want to add to that, or Tom? Did you?
I mean, I'll just, I think that was the intent. If that would have to be the only agenda item for that night in all likelihood.
Right.
And, I think we said we're probably, 4 hours, give or take, depending on how much back and forth and discussion there is. I'm of the opinion that would be a better conversation in person, but I know we're kind of up against the wire from a time perspective and trying to get some things set in place for the school year. I do think as well, it might be, we are in strange times, obviously with COVID and how that's going to impact our start of school year. So I think it might expand a little further than just goals, unless the goal is survive COVID. I mean, we just need to think through a few other things besides that. And the original intent also was thinking of it more as the 3-year strategic goals. And I think we as a committee need to step back and think are we in a position right now to think about 3-year strategic goals? Or do we want to take, again, a 1-year plan approach? And what does that mean for us from a short-term and long-term perspective? So, as we go into that, if we do it that one night, that's the only agenda item, and then we need to figure out what the scope of our discussion is going to be, 3 years, 1 year, and how or not COVID plays into that conversation.
So we do have a policy on retreats, and in our I think it's the section on governance and meetings. So I think I don't have it in front of me, but I think it does talk about keeping it to a fairly singular topic. But I agree with you. I think that certainly our goals discussion probably, would include how we're dealing with COVID anyway, or our goals could be affected by how we're dealing with COVID. So I think that's a good point. So anyone else?
The only thing else, go ahead, Sean, sorry.
Go ahead, Tom. I'll let you finish.
I was just going to say, the only thing I would add to that is actually looking at that policy, Chuck. The support to support this purpose, meetings are held at a time or place other than regular meetings. I think we're asking essentially for an exception to that policy portion
Yeah.
of it, right? Because we're going to have it at a regular time/place that would be normal meetings. And the purpose is team building, professional development, and preliminary planning or goal setting. So I guess there is a question there that this would be the preliminary phase of planning and goal setting as opposed to the final, because we are going through the discussion. We're not going to come out there necessarily and stamp and approve the goals as a result of that meeting, but we will preliminarily be discussing them, putting ideas on the table, brainstorming, etc.
Yeah, I wouldn't envision us to get them all buttoned up that night, so we could have a subsequent retreat. I mean, I think the policy says you can have a few of them a year or something.
Yep, 1 to 3. Yep.
Hi, Aaron.
Sean had a question first, right?
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Sean.
Go ahead.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So I think it would be far more productive if we could do this in person.
So
I was wondering
Just freeze it up.
if
yeah, Aaron, you're freezing. Aaron.
No, she was muted.
Okay, so John, to Aaron's point, she mentioned doing it. I agree, and Tom touched on it as well. Do we have any sense from the governor on, I mean, we're talking about a month from now, whether we could in fact meet in person?
No, we don't have any guidance yet. We don't have guidance on what school's going to look like. Never mind public meetings.
Yeah. All right, so maybe I can just, I'm going to do some research on that, because I think that, there's a lot of things. I mean, I just came from a baseball diamond. I mean, people are paying attention. There were people, they're wearing masks, they're doing the right things. So I would think that, if we can do that, we should be, and we've got a big enough room where we can social distance, and maybe the public just can't be there, just, kind of like they're doing with basketball games, right? No fans. So not that the public are fans, but
You can't exclude the public because it's a public meeting. That was the conversation we had to have with town meeting.
yeah, but
and
couldn't they still participate remotely?
They could, but if they want to be there, you can't exclude them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, that it's a good point by Aaron. And Tom, we do have some time, so to look into it. So. Okay. And Sean, you had something?
Yeah, Chuck, all I was going to say, I don't know where exactly our agenda item tonight around racial equity is going to go. But I can imagine that we might want to, as an offshoot of that discussion, it could potentially manifest itself as, goals for the superintendent, goals for the district, goals for the committee, for the committee ourselves. And that probably fits within the bucket that Tom laid out about, around team building. Maybe you could kind of shoehorn it in there a little bit. But I want to, I just want to make sure that as we think about planning for August 13th, we're not sort of losing the thread on that discussion. If there's anything that comes out this evening that's tangible, and for us to kind of build into that, it just feels timely.
Okay.
Sean, if I can just add, or Chuck, if I can just add to that, I don't think I think you'll see tonight in our presentation, Sean, that this is already on our forefront. We're having discussions all summer about it, and it is our intent to have it as school improvement and district improvement plan goals for this upcoming year.
Yep. That's great.
Thanks, John. Aaron's back. Can you hear us again, Aaron?
I can, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so
Sorry.
we were talking about your suggestion about a non-remote meeting. So that's something I'm going to try and look into and see whether that's even possible. But there seems to be time to do that. So
Sorry. We're still eyeing the 13th.
correct.
So I don't know how much you heard of my question or whether I got cut off.
We
so I
didn't.
apologize.
You should. We heard it up until where we were meeting, and that was it. So
Okay. So my other question was, are we also having a school committee meeting in August? Because the only thing on the calendar between now and the start of school was August 13th.
Yeah, we would. We'll have to. We'll have to figure that out after tonight. Yes, we'll have something. Typically, late August, like the last week or something, and maybe some of that's gonna. We most definitely probably will, just because there'll be a lot to probably report out on what we're doing in the fall, other than what we hear tonight. So,
Okay.
Tom?
Just to build on Aaron's comment there, I think we have a few, and Dr. Doherty can chime in on this or correct me where necessary, but I believe with the initial publication by the state, I know they've sent some updated ones since then. We have an obligation to submit a response to them by the middle of August or something that we should vote on, I think, for the 3 options. And so I think we probably need to make sure we set some time for that, whether it's late July or, the week before the retreat, or the retreat moves because August 13th makes the most sense for that deliverable, depending upon when that deliverable is. But we need to make sure we account for those type of other things too. And as Dr. Doherty and staff bring more information, I think my view, and others may agree or may disagree, is that the community wants to hear more about how we're trying to respond to this and what it's going to look like. And while the letters keep going out, and I think there's been great progress in that, I think we also need to continue to have the discussion and be continual sounding boards to strengthen it as we go through time as well. So I think it's important we do have 1, if not 2 more meetings in addition to the retreat prior to the school year, and maybe more depending on how things evolve as we hear more from DESE and others.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is to revisit the social media policy and for a discussion. And that was included in the packet, and I did, there was, some questions about I think we really only had maybe one thing, that the one event with the policy since we approved it. And I did have conversation with Colby about that, and I can just read to you what she said. And this conversation started with, I was asked if it was an open meeting law violation. So with her response was, I do not see this as an open meeting violation. With respect to the policy procedure, one could argue that this was skirting the line. If not a violation of the procedures, my concerns are this. Per your policy, any response must be in accordance with the procedures. Per your policy, any response must avoid the appearance of deliberation. In reviewing the response, there are a couple issues. One, it appears from this response that the responder and one member may have had a discussion on the issue. The appearance, at least, they're just appearance of a deliberation. Also, per the procedures, the response appears to put forth an opinion and seems to speak on behalf of the whole committee in response to a vote of one member. As such, I would advise the committee that any post on the social media by the social media coordinator refrain from anything that gives the appearance of deliberation and seems to put forth an opinion or position of the school committee as a whole. So that's kind of what she came back with. So I guess this was, I didn't have any specific, I know some of the, the committee wanted to discuss this, so I just open up the conversation with people's thoughts. Tom, was that raised from before or is it Carla up?
Carla's up. That was from before.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, Carla. You're on mute.
Thank you. Quick question on that, Chuck. Was that concern brought up by a school committee member, or was this just from the public?
It was by the membership.
By the
By a
membership?
school committee member, yes.
Can you elaborate on that or not?
I can elaborate. I brought it up. Yeah, I'm going to try and stay away from sort of the content of the post and focus on the policy aspects here for the purpose of this discussion. I was infuriated by that post, to be honest. And again, it's not necessarily about the content, but I thought we had a clear understanding that the intent was to share strictly factual information, which was intended to sort of clear up, misunderstandings about factual information. Much of the post, I think, attempted to do that, although I would argue that, choosing quotes from among a long discussion is, can be a way to express an opinion, but leaving that aside, there was a paragraph in particular in the middle that was explicitly, let me look at it here, where I must disagree with your post. These votes don't rise to the level of such and such. Like those things are opinions, and they're the opinions of one member. I don't know, maybe more. I don't know exactly how this post was constructed, but they're not my opinion necessarily, and I don't. I was dumbfounded to see this, frankly, posted on behalf of the school committee with the reference to the social media coordinator position at the top, because this just flies against everything that I thought we talked about as the intent here. And what frustrated me the most, to be honest, is that I felt bound by the policy and constrained by the policy to not speak up and say, I don't agree with all, I don't agree with all the conclusions. I don't agree with all the opinions shared here. These don't reflect the deliberation by the school committee. I felt sort of constrained to be able to weigh in and say, there's a difference of opinion here. I had folks reaching out to me directly saying, really frustrated by this post, by the school committee's position on this thing. And you have to try and explain, well, this isn't actually the school committee's position. This is the position of one member who posted something ostensibly on behalf of us, but without any consultation with the rest of us. So I thought it was a pretty gross sort of misuse of the policy, frankly. You know, the number 3 in our expectations says school committee members should generally avoid posting policy positions or opinions concerning topics under their jurisdiction. This post did not meet that bar from where I sit, and I don't understand. I don't understand how we got here. So I brought it up to Chuck. I can't speak for others. I don't know if anybody else did, but I certainly asked Chuck to put this on the agenda because I was pretty frustrated by the post.
So you asked me to put on the agenda. John was concerned that it might be OML, right, John? Yeah.
That is correct. Not only an OML, but a breach in the policy in and of itself. If we look at our past procedures, you know, we're supposed to accept the will of the majority. Once a vote's taken, that's where we are. That's the way it's, you know, since I've been on the committee, that's the way we've looked at it. Whether we all agree with a specific vote or not, once that vote is taken, that is the will of the majority. And that's what's represented. And this post did not represent that at all. It spoke to a lot of I comments. Shouldn't be an I comment if you're speaking to the committee, for the committee, excuse me. I do believe Carla had every right to go in and respond, as she did. I disagree that the social media person went in and did it to the way they did it.
Okay, so before we go any further, I just wanted to. I apologize. Sharilla Sharilla Lestrade has joined the meeting, and I apologize that I didn't say that sooner. I saw you there, and we got on the discussion. Welcome. So I guess you know, unless committee doesn't agree with me, I would like to, with this discussion, kind of figure out, you know, make sure there's an understanding going forward in terms of rehashing what we did or didn't like about it, because that's why we're having the discussion, because there were some concerns about it. So I think we know all that. Now let's just figure out so that, you know, it doesn't happen again, I guess. So Tom, did you have anything?
Sure. First of all, thank you. All the feedback is valuable and important. In no way, shape, or form was it intended to cause the firestorm that it did. It was actually trying to stop the firestorm if possible, but obviously that didn't work. So we live and we learn, and we try and get better day by day. A couple of things from the way in which I approach things, and I don't know that everybody understands, and I want to raise those so people see where things were coming from. And then we can obviously work to improve things, whether that's change the procedures, adjust the way that we report back, or anything else along those lines. First, as people noted, I start that post with the star on, you know, as a school committee member. I forget exactly what the things are, but the point of the star thing when I post on social media is to make it very clear what hat I'm wearing. It did not say on behalf of the school committee. And I think that's where part of the confusion is happening here. I for the last year and a half as a member of the school committee, I have not responded a lot to social media, but when I have, I've tried to clarify in what role I'm responding, whether as a parent or as a school committee member. It's a very hard line for each and every one of us to walk. But I was responding as a school committee member, not on behalf of the school committee. And obviously that was confusion by the public, confusion by others. But if you go back and look through some other things, you know can see that as well. Second, you know, I tried to keep it to facts, except for where it was something that wasn't under our jurisdiction. So the discussion that happened in a meeting, and I did include quotes yes, they were selective quotes because they were opposite of a lot of the conversation to bring the rest of the conversation around. But whether or not a certain member is a racist isn't under our jurisdiction. So I think I can definitely improve in the way that response had been written as well, to delineate the fact portion from the opinion portion. Always open to improvement. So there's a couple of things there that I hear the feedback. I appreciate the feedback. Always trying to get better. I do think there's a difference between things that are under our jurisdiction and things that aren't. While racism in the schools may be under our jurisdiction to try and make sure we weed that out and get it out of there, a particular member isn't necessarily. So I also tried to be clear about I versus we where possible. I think I fell down in one particular place there at the very beginning. If I had said at the very first sentence where I said the second sentence, I guess, of the first sentence of the second paragraph, if I had said as a member or not on behalf of, or if I had clarified, that might have helped as well. So I can always get better. I think we can all always get better, and I appreciate this feedback.
Thank you, Tom. Aaron?
Hi, thank you. So I have a number of issues I want to make sure that we discuss about our policy. So as Tom and I are both the social media coordinators for the month, I want to make sure that I understand what that means, because to me it meant that if there was anything questionable on social media that we would be consulting with each other, potentially consulting with Chuck as the chair. There was one response that I ran by Dr. Doherty, just to be sure that I was responding correctly. So one of the first things that took me by surprise with that post was that I had not spoken at all with Tom about it. So I was really taken aback that a post of that significance wasn't discussed with the other monthly social media coordinators. So maybe I misunderstood what that relationship would be between those two people. So that's one thing I would like to make sure we clarify. Another thing is I hear what you're saying, Tom, about how you felt you worded it, but it definitely did give off the impression as if you were speaking for the whole school committee. So I think we need to be really crystal clear on what we feel comfortable responding to as school committee members. Because I, number one, didn't think that it warranted a response from the entire school committee. I thought that the individual school committee member who was addressed could have responded. And number two, if we were going to go down that route, I thought it would be a conversation between Tom and myself, and I would have done something much just shorter and more direct. I was worried about this point of whether that individual school committee member was allowed to comment, what were other interpretations on that. So I actually also spoke with Colby about this, and she felt that absolutely the school committee member could have spoken as a citizen and could have responded for themselves. So again, just it brought up a lot of gray, I think, for us, and we can't have that kind of gray with this policy. And my third thing is I feel very uncomfortable with that sitting out there as the quote-unquote official school committee response. So I would like to put another comment below it clarifying that it is not an official school committee response, that the opinions are from the original poster, and that when school committee is commenting on social media, we will be sticking to our policy and procedures. So those are my points.
So I know Sean has a question, but let me just, before, I just wanted to just kind of recap the takeaways I got from that. So, the first thing was, maybe we should craft into this procedures that the two coordinators consult each other and then agree with whoever's going to respond. Yeah, that's what I heard. And then, I guess the comment about speaking for the whole committee, I mean, my thoughts on this was for this, and this was with this whole social media policy and stuff, was that whoever was the coordinator was going to be the spokesperson for the committee for that month. So I guess
We just lose Chuck.
He was about to say something really profound too. I don't know.
Why don't you go ahead and
I'll pick up
I can
until
jump in afterwards.
Chuck comes back. So, Tom, I need to kind of clarify. So, the first two lines of the post read star replying as one of two social media social media coordinators of the school committee for the next month, star. And then the first line of the next paragraph was, first, let me apologize for the delayed response from the committee. To me, that implies that everything that follows is the response from the committee. And there are two ways to look at the social media coordinator position. One is you're serving as the spokesperson for the committee on issues that we deem as covered by the policy. Two is you have free reign to go off and participate in social media as you choose, because there's only two of you and we won't run into open meeting issues. I don't think any of us intended the latter, but that's almost what is implied by your comment that you were just highlighting the hat you were wearing, but you weren't speaking on behalf of the committee. The hat you were wearing was on behalf of the committee by definition per this policy, as I understand it. And so, again, aside from the opinions and so forth and things like that, I can't imagine that it's appropriate, whether we did it via deliberation or whether we did it in this kind of social media coordinator way, for us to shout down the opinion of a parent, right? If that opinion is directed at an individual, then sure, the individual can engage with the parent, fine. But these things are the opinion of a parent. It's just not. I don't see how it's appropriate for us in the school committee, again, as a deliberative body or as individuals, to attempt to sort of knock that down. And I don't. I'm frankly just dumbfounded, and Aaron said it, but that something of this significance, didn't get more of kind of a hearing before it was posted on behalf of the committee. I never would have voted to approve something of this, regardless of where I sit on the merits of the criticism of the member or the merits of the opinion of the parent or what have you. I never would have supported a statement like this, on my behalf or from the school committee. I think it's our role to listen to parents, to take the criticisms, even and maybe especially when they're uncomfortable. And if there are things we need to engage with, on a personal basis or what have you, fine. But I wouldn't expect anybody to stand up and defend me on behalf of the committee. I wouldn't, try and stand up and defend any of you on behalf of the committee. If somebody says the first day of school is September 12th, I might say, no, it's actually September. I actually don't know what day it is, but it's September, whatever day it is, right? That's the kind of thing we should be doing as social media coordinators, not sharing what are opinions in a very fraught discussion that should be had between two people, not from a committee at somebody. I hope it's coming through that, like, this to me feels way off the rails, not just a matter of interpretation of the first couple of sentences. This feels way off the rails, like to the point where I'd rather rescind the policy and stop doing this if we can't reach an agreement that this was not appropriate.
All right. Can everyone see me again? I apologize. I don't know what happened. It just died so where I was when I said, speaking for the committee, and I think you know, in doing that, it really, my intent, I thought our intent was, when you're speaking for the committee, it's just really on procedural things that we voted, or information about something, and I guess I wouldn't be opposed to, if a post calls out an individual on the committee, I guess I wouldn't be opposed to that individual responding as themselves. So I think that's what Colby told you, Aaron, or?
Yes, that's what Colby told me. Carla, you're muted.
Carla, you're muted. Sorry.
I have a lot of concerns, and I've expressed my different concerns with each individual members, and I'd like some members to know that I hear loud and clear where you're coming from, and I think people need to review the policy, the social media policy. Erin, I think part of the issue with you being the social media coordinator this month, and sort of not thinking that it was necessary for a response, I feel like is not following the policy, for one. I think that I was almost stopped because of a quorum. It's my understanding that we as school committee members are not allowed to respond to any post on social media that has to do with the schools, right? So what happened? So Sean made 2 comments on that thread, and those comments were deleted by the person that he followed along with. John put an emoji up on the thread, so that was the second person from the committee who had responded to that post, a school-related post. Tom, as coordinator, made a post. So guess who wasn't able to, because as school committee members, we're not able to respond to posts. I contacted Colby to find out if I could respond, even when there was a quorum that had already been met. So by other school committee members responding to it, it almost disallowed me to respond to it. But Colby said, in a situation such as this, you shouldn't be responding, but you have to respond. So we need to be really careful with this policy, and we need to follow the guidelines with our school committee policy. And the policy is, if it's related to the schools, you are not allowed to respond as a school committee member.
Right.
Where does it say that? Exactly.
And Colby confirmed it as well, and maybe we need a refresher from Colby on it.
Yeah, because I spoke with Colby today, and she said that you could have responded as a citizen, that you could have responded, and the rest of us could have just stayed out of it as the school committee.
I think it's an order of operations question, Aaron. Ultimately, that's where it comes down to, but I think John's had his hand raised, so let's give him his chance.
John?
Yeah, first of all, I didn't have an emoji on there. I had an emoji on Sharilla's post on her own page, which is quite different than a private page where it was posted afterwards. Secondly, I think this post went outside our purview. It brought in an instructional motion which had nothing to do with school committee. That was town meeting. Should not have been addressed. And I'm sorry, you know what? A vote like that is on the member. That's the member's post to decide how to respond to. And then the other thing I'm still having an issue with is the fact that it was posted that there was going to be a meeting. That's between Ms. Lestrade and Miss Nazaro. It's not between anybody else, and it should not have been included in that post. I think, you know, whichever one reached out and set this up, that's excellent. That's the way it should be done. But I don't think it should be publicly recognized by the person posting for the school committee. That is truly that member's responsibility. If they want to post it, I 100% agree with it. I will say under the procedures, number 3, it says should generally, needs to be changed to will. Avoid posting policy positions and opinions. And that way it saves a lot of headache. We've got some serious work to do now with this policy. I've got a lot of issue with the post. As I let Tom know, I think there was a lot more opinion than should have had in it. And I think, as I told Tom myself, the person that voted needs to own their vote and talk to the person that doesn't like it. It's not our job to explain each other's votes. It's ours to follow the will of the majority. If I don't like something like the social media policy that I voted against because I had worries about this, then I own that vote and I have to explain it myself. It's not up to anybody else to explain why I voted no. But I'll tell you, it's very clear why I voted no after that first post. Thank you.
Tom?
I'll just, first of all, Aaron, you asked for a post to go in or underneath it to explain what was happening. I had such a post drafted and we decided to hold off until this conversation. So we can figure out, you know, it was drafted that same day, right? But we decided to hold off until this conversation. So that could go in to clarify whatever's necessary there, make it very short and sweet. I had it drafted to answer a lot of the questions that came in afterwards, all fair questions, all valid questions, but we can shorten it up and make it even just, no, this wasn't, right? If that's what we decide to do. You know, I think this, what everybody's forgetting that makes this a school committee item was the conversation in the post, not just about who or who wasn't racist, but an inability to get into our meeting as though we had purposefully or otherwise blocked that. And I think we didn't. And I think that's part of the reason why, in my judgment, and everybody has their own judgment clearly, that's why we're a committee, part of the reason why, in my judgment, it was appropriate for the school committee social media coordinator to respond. Now, the feedback given here, maybe that should have been the only point that was addressed by the social media coordinator. Maybe. I mean, that's fair feedback. I think we knew as well going in that this was going to be not this topic, not this particular topic, but overall this was going to be a learning experience for us as we went through this. I disagree, Chuck, with the assertion that we would be speaking on behalf of the committee when we were posting. As the drafter, right? The intent was, and if we need to clarify the intent was to make sure that the school committee could communicate, or members of the school committee could communicate in a fashion that was safe from an open meeting law perspective. That was the intent. Going all the way back to a year and a half ago when this first started from a conversation point, it was the assertion that school committee members could not communicate on social media because it would be an open meeting law violation. And it was the assertion that social media was exactly like electronic communication. I can pull up the video for it, unfortunately.
Well, the assertion was that, you partially agree, the assertion was the concern was that if there wasn't a policy and there could be an open meeting violation because various committee members would at different times go in and comment on a post. Not just an automatic open meeting violation, it would still have to be, more than one, there would have to be a quorum of members. My point about so my whole thing about with social media, use of social media fell under the conversations we always have is about communication, better communication.
Yep.
So what I was saying was, it's another way to be able to better communicate to the community about happenings at the school committee, not drawing value judgments about what happened at the committee, but just like Joe Friday used to say, just the facts and only the facts, man, so I think I really dated myself there, but that's all I was saying, Tom. So, I mean, if you don't agree, that's fine. Then that's what we should discuss, if we want it to be more than that.
I think just to go to that, I think one of the things we added specifically into the procedure for this is like the 2 members sitting for office hours. When you sit as 2 members in the office hours, you're sitting as 2 members. You're not sitting as the committee. You don't speak on behalf of the committee in that. You listen, you hear, you may provide some feedback, you may provide some ideas, you may encourage them to come speak at public meeting, but you're not speaking on behalf of the committee in those cases, right? That's the same thing here as well. Now, again, maybe, in fact, it seems very likely that this could have been done and should have been done better from a communication perspective. 100%, I take that. I'll go back to that. Always room for improvement. But the intent was not and never has been to speak for the committee, right? The only person, per our policies, that can speak for the committee is the chair. That's it. And generally, the chair should be speaking according to what we voted on already, right? So otherwise, we're always speaking for ourselves. But we have hats we wear. We have roles we play. In which case, the intent of the star, and you'll see me do it when I do individual posts as well, is to clarify the role in which I'm playing when I do those things. The first sentence, Sean, I agree. That was where I went awry, 100%. If I had said as a member, if I had even excluded that sentence, maybe things would be a little bit better, a little bit different. I understand there's other views of opinions in there too. Always can get better, and we should, and I will, continue to strive to get better.
So Tom, can I ask then, I mean, it sounds like you're going back to this idea, or you're landing on this idea that what the policy of the social media coordinators does essentially is gives each of us an opportunity 1/3 of the time to operate freely as an individual, share opinions, and have a kind of a backstop against open meeting law violations. That's essentially what you're, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I'm hearing when you say it was never intended to be on behalf of the committee. It was always intended to be, I happen to be a social media coordinator this month, but these are my personal opinions. These are my personal perspectives. If that's the case, I find this policy pretty problematic. So I
wouldn't say that.
You're shaking your head no, but you got to help me understand here because I'm not getting it.
I would agree with your statement that it was never meant for the social media coordinator to speak on behalf of. As the drafter, that was never the intention, because we have other policies that say we can't do that, right? And this didn't exclude those policies. It was never the intention to just go out and willy-nilly post all your opinions and policy positions either, necessarily. That's why there's the generally. It was never that intent either. So like I said, where I could have gone better and done better would be to separate the portion of school committee and individual, and that's taken. That's a point of improvement. I did try to post a lot of facts in that as well, but clearly some of the conclusions I drew, people disagreed with, so that makes them opinion, obviously, and some of the other statements I made, people disagreed with. So that's fine. I'll work to get better. It was not the intention, though, Sean, to just willy-nilly go out and post opinions. No, that is not the intention.
So can I clarify something? Because I still feel like confused on a couple things. So do we think that the two social media coordinators should be talking to each other if there is confusion about how to respond to a post or whether to respond to a post? You know, there have been a few things that I've responded to that are very straightforward. Like, oh, you need this email address? Here's how you email the school committee. That's sort of, you know, answering straightforward questions with factual information is what I thought our role was as social media coordinators. But so I'm still confused whether we think the two coordinators should be talking. And I still feel gray on why Carla couldn't have responded to this before Tom posted order of operations, like before Tom put anything out there, why Carla couldn't have responded with a straightforward, Cheryl, I'd like to meet and talk, let's get together, you know, whatever. So can we talk about that? I mean, tomorrow, if somebody goes on and calls somebody out on their vote tonight, can that member respond and offer to talk to the person? Or does it have to be me and Tom? Because that doesn't feel right.
So I think that, I'm sorry, did I interrupt somebody? I think that's, you know, that's something that we need to find, you know, come to a conclusion with this conversation. You know, I think in Carla's defense, I mean, she felt like, at least I'm not putting words, you didn't say it, but I'm thinking she probably didn't respond because she didn't think she was allowed to, but that's what I think. And so I think what we can decide either, so one of the things we were thinking about is maybe there's a lot of ideas, I'm just backing up here there's a lot of ideas that are coming in this discussion, and, you know, maybe we suspend the policy for, you know, a week or whatever, or two, or whenever, till our next meeting, and have it tightened up the way from whatever we get from this conversation, and revote it at that point, or reconvene using social media. That's just a thought. If people don't want to do that, that's fine. But so I think that, you know, one of the things I'd like to see, you know, us agree on is if it is something where you know, it's directed at an individual member of the committee, you know, maybe the committee member just picks up the phone and calls the coordinator and says, I got this one. This is mine, you know. I don't think that would be a violation of open meeting law. Just say, I got this one. And anything that is, you know, maybe when they say they got it, it means they're going to ignore it or they're going to respond to it. But it won't be on the committee to respond to it at that point. It's that individual says, I got it, and go from there. I also think that, you know, maybe the two assigned social media coordinators, you know, when something's on social media, just, you know, communicate with each other to decide who's going to respond to whatever post it is. That's a fair expectation, I guess, of each, you know, so that, you know, Aaron, you're not wondering if Tom's going to respond, and Tom's not wondering if you're going to respond. You just takes a 2-minute text or a phone call, just say, I'll take care of this one, and this is what I'm going to say, something along those lines. So I'll stop. Tom, did you have something? Or?
I didn't necessarily, but I would. I don't think personally that we should or can suspend the policy right now.
Okay.
It's not out there for us to do so. We can amend the procedures without any vote or change accordingly. I think what you just put forward are suitable minor amendments that help clarify. right? We're trying to clear up the gray appropriately as part of this. You know, in this particular case, this was a, you know, rock meet hard place particular case, right? Carla felt that it was in the appropriateness of the social media coordinator. She could only reach out to one of us for technical reasons. She reached out to me. Because of the challenge of the issue, Chuck, I reached out to you. So there were 3 of us, which meant I could not talk to Aaron, right? And that's the issue. So in the case, I do think that it helps clear up the procedure. In the case of it's a particular person that the post is about, that person should respond. And I agree with that. And that clears up any confusion or anything else around those things. I also agree that the 2 coordinators should talk. And we wouldn't need to have a worry about open meeting law because we've solved for any other challenging issues like that, because we've solved it by that person being able to respond for themselves, right? So we just, these 2 small changes, and if we need to make changes about opinion, or you know, everybody's opinion is a difference about opinion too, at times. Different opinion about what facts are at times. So I think that's a little bit harder for me to make adjustments to. But I think the last 2 that you just proposed are simple changes to procedure. I can draw them up and, you know, share them with Erin, so she's comfortable because she brought them up as well. And then we can talk about it, and if we don't need to vote on it, but talk about it at our next meeting and be done with it, and move on.
John,
sorry.
John Parks?
Yeah, as far as suspending the policy, no, we cannot. As far as suspending responding to social media responses, yes, we can. I honestly think the procedure needs to be tightened up by the committee before we go out and start responding again. I think this should be back on the agenda for next meeting. We should be bringing our policy change, not our policy, our procedure changes. And I think we need to actually vote on those procedures. I think this was one that, you know, definitely hit us hard as a committee. I'll take some ownership as well because I voted on the policy. Whether I voted for the policy or not, it's still our policy. I have to own it. So I will own it. But I think before we do any more posting, I think these procedures need to be locked down so that things like this don't happen again.
Sean, did you have something?
Yeah, I would just echo what John said. You know, my understanding is that there's nothing to prevent us from suspending the procedures. The policies are more generic around us, you know, endeavoring to engage effectively and to, you know, steer clear of open meeting law and that sort of thing. You know, those can stand without us having an active role of social media coordinator, and we can kind of, you know, at least for some interim period, operate the way we always, you know, the way we have in the past. You know, so I think John's right that is an avenue that's available to us. I guess what I'm, you know, Tom, I appreciate the I'll say calmness with which you're taking some harsh criticism here. I'm curious, you know, I guess I need to hear you articulate, or I'd like to hear you articulate, if this situation were to arise again, how would you have approached it differently before I can feel sort of comfortable that we're going to continue on in this mode, right? You know what, and you've mentioned a couple of things. Maybe you'd make it a little bit more clear at the beginning that it's your personal opinion. But if the rest of the post would have essentially stood as is, I don't really understand why we would have a procedure in place that gives 2 random members the ability to engage in that way, and not the other 4 of us on such fraught issues.
I mean, I think the answer to that question is almost too easy right now, Sean, is that we've just agreed that this kind of issue that is attacking an individual member, that individual member can respond. And as a result, I wouldn't need to respond. I think that was the problem here, is the gray area. And is there other things I would change? Yes. I mean, yes. What it is right now, I don't know off the top of my head what I would change. I think I would probably try to post one thing from a school committee hat and one thing from a person hat, but that doesn't answer the question necessarily, Sean, the way you may want it to be answered. I do think, though, that what we've just discussed as a committee, and more or less, I think there's some general agreement with those two additional changes, would make this a lot easier. I think we knew going in it was going to be bumpy from the beginning. We didn't know it was going to be this bumpy, right? One of the more challenging issues we've had to face in the last probably 3 or 4 years, if not 8 or 10. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've cleared up some of the biggest holes, and I'm sure there will be other holes that we need to clear up. And I would think that as we go through that, and to John's point, if we want to suspend the procedures, I don't think that means we just open up the turn that everybody can start responding either. I think we all go silent until we figure this out. And then we go from there. I would think we want to put some other things in there so that we can, clarify, am I speaking as an individual or am I speaking as a school committee member? And even so, say it's not as or not on behalf of, if we have to come to the agreement on that. So those kind of things as well, I think are things we can work to improve the overall plan, communication, procedure, get everybody on the same page. There's all sorts of unknowns that we don't know, and that's the challenge we're dealing with here. Where we can only go through what we've experienced and work to get better, and work to get better every day.
Aaron?
Yeah, if people feel strongly that we need to suspend procedures, I would get on board with that. I don't feel as strongly that we need to suspend procedures because I know other types of questions that I've been answering in the past couple weeks, which are very straightforward, but which I feel the school committee can address. The one thing I do want to say is I don't think we should suspend our Facebook page. We've built a following. I think it's important that we continue to be able to share things there. Again, it's totally factual, so, we would share the video of this meeting when it becomes available. Things like that. We would share, we share Dr. Doherty's notices, things like that, but I would not wish to suspend that right now. I don't know how other people feel, but.
Yeah, I don't think that was even in question. I think it was more posting, not our page, but posting things that may be on other pages as a school committee. So I guess when I said to suspend the policy, I guess what I meant was, I think what Tom said was go silent until we sort things out. But, I don't know whether as I've thought about it now, unless there's other committee members want to kind of process this alone for a while, and then we'll come back with any thoughts they have with changing the procedures, or say them tonight other than what's already been said, and maybe we can at least agree on principle as to what the changes are, and then we'll get it memorialized in this document, in the next few days, and make sure everyone has it. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine. I can get on board with not suspending the policy and attempting to clean this up, in a future meeting, incorporating some of the things we talked about tonight. I do think it'd be helpful to follow up that post with that particular post with a clarifying post, right? That the views are, Tom's and Tom's alone, essentially. And I don't, when we get to another more detailed discussion of the procedures, maybe there's something we specify that goes at the top as a tag on all posts that somebody posts to social media coordinator, so there's no confusion about, how somebody's, representing themselves or the committee or who exactly they're representing. If we have kind of a common tag for that, then maybe it'll help clear some of this up. I'm still not 100% convinced we're on the same page in terms of whether or not the social media coordinator is on behalf of the committee or not. Feels like we still have some difference of opinion on that. I think, to me, inherently you are, but I'm hearing Tom say that's not the intent, and that wasn't his intent with the post. So I don't know that a few tweaks to the procedures will quite get us over that hurdle. But I can get on board with not suspending the procedures for now if we're going to revisit.
Okay, Carla, sorry.
My thought on this whole procedure is that it was never the intention of allowing a school committee member to make comment on any school-related post. One, because you don't want to provide your opinion on that. Two, because you don't want to create the appearance of deliberation. Three, you don't want to get ahead to the point where you have a quorum. So my thought on it was that school committee members are not allowed to comment on any school-related social media posts.
Other than the assigned coordinators.
Absolutely. To me, that seems like the intent of the procedure.
Yeah, I mean, that was my intent, and Tom, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I think that was the, intent as we first started talking about this was in order to avoid open meeting law violations, we would assign in 2 individuals to, on a rolling basis to respond to stuff. And that includes, the rest of the committee not responding, not thumbs up or liking or loving or anything. Just let the coordinators do it. And I think if we continue that, that's fine. But I think that if we take out of the equation anything that's directed at a specific committee member, then that committee member just needs to, pick up the phone and tell the coordinator or text him or whatever and say, I got this one. This is to me. And I think as time evolves, the coordinators will know that if there's something directed at a committee member, that's hands off. That's the committee member's responsibility either to ignore it or have something to say about it. John, did you?
Yeah, this wasn't a school-related vote. This was to support a specific thing as a committee. I'm under the understanding I own my vote. So therefore, I'm going to speak to it. I don't expect Tom or Erin to speak to my vote. As an individual, it's my vote. I own it. If people have questions on it, I expect them to reach out to me and for me alone to answer it. Again, this wasn't a school related. This was a committee request to back a rally. And that's what I see is different here.
No, but you're talking about the vote versus the social media post. I think what we're talking, those are 2 separate things. So the social media post was about the vote, but the point I was trying to make was when a post comes out about an individual, which it did in this case, then going forward, the social media policy would say, or the procedures would say that that individual takes that on or doesn't take it falls on them, and what they do with it is up to them, but they're not speaking for the committee. If there's another post from somebody that's, you know, talking about, you know, I heard the school committee voted on the, you know, a new science program or something, then that would be something that the social media coordinators would, again, compare notes quickly, say, do you want me to respond to this, or I will? This is what I thought I would say. So, I think we're trying to separate the two right now tonight, so that we don't have a situation like this going forward.
Perfect. Thanks, Chuck.
I'm sorry?
I just said thanks.
Anybody else? So, I guess I'm of the thought, and I don't know what others are, that we have, I think, some consensus on, you know, what we want to do going forward. And maybe if the two social media coordinators would maybe be willing to draft or make the changes to the existing procedures, and just keep going as you're going. I mean, I think you all know what I think you know what the expectation is going forward. And then if we can memorialize it, and then we can hand that out at the next meeting. But maybe we don't have to suspend anything at this point if everyone agrees what we will and won't respond to. Sean, did you all right with that, or?
Yeah, I mean, my only ask is that we have a follow-up to the post, just to clarify that, you know, the opinions are not representative of the committee or any deliberation by the committee.
Yeah, and at Miss Tom's defense, he did write I want to write a response, and wrote a response, and I asked him to not make any more posts until the committee had an opportunity to discuss this. So
yeah, and I appreciate that, but now that we've discussed it, I think it'd be good to clarify that the opinions, you know, the opinions represent the writer, and not any deliberation by the committee.
okay.
Just to be completely safe on this, is it a statement that you can run by us, Tom? If you have something ready?
I had something that was longer, basically going through the Q&A. I don't think it's, given this conversation, that's what this committee is going to want. So I have to shorten it, basically, and not go through the Q&A, but basically, to Sean's point, you know, the intent. I mean, I'm going to try and figure out how to say this in like one paragraph or less, right? Everybody knows I can be wordy, so I got to try and keep it short. That, you know, the star was to show the hat I'm wearing, not that I'm speaking on behalf. That the opinions posted there were mine, and that's essentially the essence of what it would say. And we'll figure out if anybody feels like I need to say anything else other than that, I will. But I was, you know, I had a much longer Q&A, basically, where everybody's questions were answered, and I will try to avoid that length.
So, Tom, if I mean, if you guys want to just kind of, you can, when you do your revisions, run it by Aaron, and then as kind of how we're going to do things going, so that the two of you can agree with whatever goes out.
Sure. I mean, I think.
Are you all right with that, Aaron?
Yeah. I just want it to happen promptly.
Given how long this meeting is going, it's probably not going to happen tonight, but I can get it done tomorrow, most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, and believe Aaron, the lack of thing, that's on me, that's not on Tom. I wanted to have this discussion before anything else went out.
No, and I do understand that. Given how muddy this situation already was, I appreciate, as much as I know it maybe frustrated some members of the general public, I do think it was important that we all came together and hashed this out. So I understand that.
Okay, any other comments? So we have a plan going forward on this?
Yep. Aaron and I will also work together to update the procedures that you talked about, Chuck.
Yep.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay, John, how long do you think the fall opening presentation will be, roughly?
My guess is with questions, it's probably going to be 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay, because I know Sharilla is here.
Yeah, we can move it towards the end. We can move the presentation towards the end.
Unless you want to hear that, Sharilla, that's up to you.
I can do it now.
No, I think they're saying you want to hear the conversation.
I can speak now if that's
Okay.
fine, or whenever you're ready.
Okay, why don't you, so what we'll do is you can, we'll have you speak and then we'll have the, the resolution and actually we'll do the discussion on racial equality after you speak and then we'll do the resolution. I'll flip-flop that again, so. Sorry, Sharilla, I'm just trying to keep my order here, so, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is, Sharilla Lestrade, pronouncing that right, I hope, asked to, join our committee tonight, so welcome, Sharilla.
Thank you. Good evening. I wanted to clarify my most recent post about the vote that was passed both at the school committee meeting and during the instructional motion. I wrote my post based on my truth and honest feelings, even though I knew it would receive ridicule and backlash from many. It is not a common practice for me to handle business on social media, but I saw the need. I saw no need for, because it was a public meeting and it was live. Shortly after my post went up, I did receive a message from Carla requesting, inviting me to a meeting in which we did sit down and have that meeting, and it was a very nice meeting. I did also have an opportunity to speak to Chuck prior to that meeting. Carla and I had a lengthy meeting in great depth, and we conversed as mothers, community members, and advocates fighting in the best interest of our children and students, sharing many similar concerns and some personal history, and discussed the reason for her two no votes. One against endorsing the rally, and the other against town meeting's declaration for justice. We discussed our frustrations on racial injustice, redlining, and systematic racism, the efforts that affords white privilege and economic slavery and equity. But most importantly, we talked about the value and the need to, of accurate, inappropriate, but most of all, we talked about the value and need of accurate, inclusive education for all of our young people. That was where we found common ground and we could become allies in bringing real change to our town and school. I left the conversation feeling that we could work together as examples of two people misunderstood by unintentional actions and show solidarity in the fight for justice and equality through our actions and not just our words. I felt we learned about each other and gained a better understanding of what drove each of us. I would later be confused by her asking me in a message to change my original post to denounce the racist comment. My response to that was it was a pleasure meeting with her, but it didn't change the way her actions had made me feel. I was glad that we were able to sit and share together the experience and experience of uncomfortable conversation that needed to be had. We both expressed how each other's actions made the other feel and the work that needed to be done to bring diversity to the town and make everyone's lives and contributions count. By no means did I agree to a joint statement that absolved my feelings or my post. In fact, I believe actions speak louder than words. What I did agree to is showing our solidarity through our learning, communication, and most of all, our united actions. While her intent may not have been racist, her actions made me feel different. As far as the post that was written in response to mine by school committee member Tom Wise, who is one of the school committee social media coordinators for the month of July, you've already discussed that policy, and I thank you for that. Tom's post did indicate he was responding on behalf of the school committee as the media coordinator, and based on his statement, I feel that it was implied that the census was across the board and all in agreement. Otherwise, this was a personal feeling, and opinion is expressed both by what is included in the message and that which is left out. It is clear that what Mr. Wise wrote was not a reflection of the committee's opinion and not accurately represented the entire board. Thank you for having this discussion tonight and agreeing to take further look at the policy. Our children are our future. Our children of all ages, gender, religion, state, status, color, and screaming and demanding. Let us, the adults, take a lesson from them and do better. Let us stop the hate and work towards a better Reading. I leave you with this. For almost 400 years, white folks have had the privilege of having to think about themselves as having a race. White is the default state of being. People of color have a race that makes them different from normal. Thus, the all too common statements, "I am colorblind," or "I don't see color," are racist statements as they erase non-white experiences. The idea that only inherently bad people demonstrate racism is false. Racism in itself is not just about one intention. Anyone is capable of it, even inadvertently. Me. Even people who don't even have a racist bone in their body can still display a racist attitude. White fragility is a common reaction that surfaces when white people are racially challenged. You might have felt it during my statement today. White fragility is the defensive awkwardness and anger that white people feel when confronted with their own support of racism. It may look like crying rather than engaging in a discussion, avoiding topics altogether, or requesting the way a person of color should frame their experience. It centers a white person's feelings as they often try to compare their hardship with the oppression that Black people have suffered for generations and distracts from the pressing matter of racial injustice. White fragility is a highly effective means of white racial control because of it silences the voices and those who challenge racial hierarchy in places in our society. If you are offended by the concept of white fragility, you need to ask yourself why. Why are you uncomfortable or find it upsetting or even offensive to be reminded that you are white and of your white privilege? In our country, I am reminded of every day that I am Black. There is racial inequality, and it is increasing as we speak. Let us work together through the difficult conversations, make real positive change, and end this cycle of injustice in our community. And let us act as we would like our community to represent, and let us be a role model for other communities to follow and as we lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharilla. As I mentioned when we spoke, you're a highly valued and respected member of our community, and thank you for asking to come and speak to us tonight. We do appreciate that, and to your and thank you for your words on our willingness to do some work on the social media policy. I think it was a good discussion, and we'll do better with that going forward. But again, I know we've met over the years. I mean, you've been a very valued member of our community, so thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions? Or Cheryl, were you going to stay around for our next agenda items?
The racial one?
Yeah, so we're going to have that, and we're also going to have a discussion and a vote on so the Massachusetts Association of School Committees put out a resolution, and typically we will that's our organization as a school committee, and typically we'll always discuss those and weigh in on those at our meetings. So they do a lot of good work, and it's a good resolution. So you're welcome to be involved in that discussion as well, if you'd like.
Yes, I'll stay. Thank you.
Thank you. So why don't we go back? Let's do the discussion on the resolution first. So Tom, do you mind or somebody mind reading that?
No problem. I have it right here, ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's dated today, addressed to Governor Charlie Baker, Secretary of Education James Pizer, Commissioner of Education Jeffrey Riley, Senate President Karen Spilka, House Speaker Robert DeLeo. CC to Senator Jason Lewis, State Representative Brad Jones, State Representative Richard Haggerty, and the Town of Reading Select Board. And it says, whereas, as schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil right of obtaining a free and appropriate public education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming community for all students. And whereas, it is the responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas, every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas, every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic racialized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas, every district will incorporate into their curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works with diverse perspectives. And whereas we, as school district leaders, can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Resolve that Reading School Committee and all the school districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racist practice are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in practice for our students, families, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture and that of every district in the Commonwealth is anti-racist, that acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter.
Okay, is there a second?
I guess I got to make a motion first. I
Oh,
move to endorse the MASC anti-racism resolution.
Second.
Okay, I'll
Give it to John.
open it up to discussion. I'm sorry, Sean?
I was just joking. You can give it to John. It was close to a tie. Sorry, Linda, I'm seeing a comment in the chat about making a correction. Is that the period after Tom's name? There's a period after Tom's name, I think. At the very top.
No, adding the district. So at the bottom of the resolution it says whereas, or excuse me, resolve that, and it should say Reading in there.
Okay. I think there's also an extraneous period at the top. Chuck, I'm a little thrown off here. Is this,
Sure.
Did we skip over the racial equity discussion? Are we going back to that?
No, we're going back to that.
Okay. Nothing to add on the resolution then. I think it's wonderful.
So I think that this also ties to a lot of the things in the presentation we'll have from staff as well. Correct, John?
We have a slide that's talking about what we're doing. Yes.
Okay, any other discussion?
I had my hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No problem. I'd like to make what I think is a friendly amendment to this resolution, if people will entertain me, and it's to add another whereas. In particular, I would propose we add the whereas that says, whereas every district shall examine their existing curriculum tools and instructional practices for underlying racial biases and work to remove them. And I put that out there because there has been a specific study done of Fountas and Pinnell LLI that documents some racial inequity in the materials used for F&P LLI, which is a tier 2, tier 3 type intervention tool that's used at the elementary level. So I'd like to propose that we add that line, and I don't know if there's other curriculum tools we need to look at, but reading is frequently in that space. And I think we also need to think about reading with regards to knowledge building and how that impacts equity and equality, and making sure that we're building up the knowledge as we go through the reading curriculum materials that we have.
And where was that going to get plugged in at right above resolved?
It can go there. It can go anywhere, really. It doesn't matter from an order perspective, but we'll just say yes right above the resolved.
Tom, could you just read it one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. Whereas Every district shall examine their existing curriculum tools and instructional practices for underlying racial biases and work to remove them. You'd have it wordsmithed or anything else if anybody wants to.
I like the sentiment. I'm not sure the procedures from a friendly amendment perspective. I wonder if we should just use will instead of shall, just to be parallel, consistent with the other, with the three middle whereases there. And then I might also suggest that the spot to place this is after the other reference to curriculum. So it would become the second to last whereas.
Okay. So I'm going to post it so Linda has it, but it's there for you as well. And if you're suggesting we change shall to will, that's fine to be consistent. I have no problem with that. And location-wise, I have no problem with that either.
Does anyone have any? Aaron, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an aside, but this came out at the same time as the other resolution that we discussed about the COVID supplies, and I'm just curious why we didn't vote on this one then.
I didn't get it until I think Sean, you sent it to me.
I did, but I have the same question as Aaron. I mean, as I understood it, they were part of the same release, and I'm not sure how one ended up on the agenda and not the other. So I'm glad we're taking it up today. I'm not.
It wasn't on purpose. I didn't have it, so.
Looks like Linda's commenting that it came out a day or two after our meeting.
Okay.
But otherwise, I wholeheartedly support this, and I like Tom's friendly amendment as well.
Tom, did you have a?
I was just going to say what Aaron already said, that it did. Well, I think at one point Tracy from Mask put them together as one greater resolution set. It did not actually start that way. The COVID one started first, and then this one started 3-4 days afterwards out of another district, and then it became part of a mask-related one. So I think it's a timing issue, and I'm happy we brought it up finally as well.
Well, yeah. All I can say is I brought it up the minute I knew about it. So. Okay. Are you ready for the vote?
So,
Carla?
Chuck, do we need to vote for the amendment first, just to be clear?
We can, yeah. So
I guess also technicality, Sean, did you second with your friendly amendment? I mean, with your friendly change?
I thought John said in the first place, and then you made a friendly. Oh, am I seconding your friendly amendment?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm seconding your friendly amendment with those proposed changes.
Okay. I accept those proposed changes as well.
Okay, so now we vote the friendly and then vote the whole thing?
Correct.
right. So this is on the friendly amendment. Carla,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. And now for the main motion. Carla,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Okay. Okay, now we can go back to the discussion on racial equity. So this is kind of I don't have anything prepared, It was just to have a discussion on it. Aaron had reached out and it was a good idea. Let's put it on the agenda. So I didn't know whether, John, did you have something too, or was it, Mike, were you including it in your presentation?
I don't have anything for.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's fine.
Can I speak?
Yes.
So I brought it up to Chuck before I knew we were going to be talking about the resolution or any of these other things. I just felt it was important as the school committee and as the, sort of the top tier of education in Reading that we as a committee commit to doing some education for ourselves. So I don't know exactly how that should look. I saw briefly in the presentation we're going to get from John that the district leadership team is reading a book together. So we could read the same book. We could talk about reading a different book. There's certainly plenty of options out there. Another idea is I know there's a course that is sometimes offered for teachers, and when there is space, they have opened it up to community members, and it's my understanding that we as a school committee could do something like that as well. So I don't know exactly what our options are. I just sort of wanted to come together as a group and talk about what work we're committed to doing for ourselves.
Who offers the course, Aaron?
Karen Hall is, I think.
Yeah,
Hall.
I could talk about that. It's a cultural proficiency class that we offered 4 times this past year. And on a space available, we have, when people have asked, we have had a few community members take part in it. It's a 12-hour in-person or remote with a 3-hour project. It's a 15-hour course.
Okay, thank you.
Is
So, Carla?
Chris, is that for all teachers?
So it's not required right now for all teachers. All teachers have to have so many professional development hours in certain topics. So one of the topics is in sheltered English immersion. This cultural proficiency class focuses on cultural proficiency with an emphasis on English language learners. One of our district's experts, we have a phenomenal English language learner department, and one of them teaches the course. She actually teaches it in other area districts now as well. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have any other questions, but we did offer it twice. From March to June, and we're on a hiatus right now. We're still in the planning stages of when we're going to offer it again.
Thank you. John, I didn't have a chance to review your slide show before the meeting. What was the book that Aaron mentioned?
Everyday Anti-Racism, Getting Real About Race in School. It's a series of short chapters that are written by different authors with discussion questions at the end of each chapter. So it would prompt good discussion. And each chapter is a little bit different. They're not all interrelated.
What's the thoughts of the committee in terms of, I mean, we need to do something, whether it be pursuing something like the course that Chris outlined, or as taking up that reading is like the staff is doing.
We're also in the process, Chuck, of putting together a shorter cultural proficiency class that focuses mainly on race, because the one we do teach covers a lot of topics. But that primarily, right now, we're in the planning stages of like a 90-minute workshop. Grant Hightower and somebody out of district and myself are meeting to discuss what that would look like.
Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be in favor of reading the same book that the administration is reading. I think that makes sense and would keep us very much in alignment with them. I also, the 90-minute course that they're talking about with Grant that Ms. Kelly just mentioned would also be something interesting for us. I'm just going to say, I don't know that I can commit 12 hours plus 3 hours to do the bigger one. I'll just put that on the table. But I can definitely read at a pace that works for us and attend a 90-minute session, seminar, et cetera, as necessary. And I think it's appropriate as well, having Grant there as one of the participants and presenters rings true to me and rings appropriate. And I'd like to suggest that those are the two actions we take for now. But I would also add that I think we should also continue to do some more study and reading on reading in particular. Reading is the foundation that unlocks everything. And if we can get reading right in Reading, and we've made great progress, but there's still progress to be made, then equity becomes more achievable. That's just one man's opinion, obviously, but that's one thing I would suggest. There's a lot there about knowledge building, about the difference in knowledge building and the difference in expected knowledge for different economic classes in particular, and how we could potentially help bridge those gaps. I think there's a book called The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler that might be interesting to read as well, and help tie that together. It's not any particular race related, but it is socioeconomic related, and that's something that might be beneficial for us to have a conversation about.
So, John or Chris, is that presentation or workshop that Mr. Hightower's putting together, is that something we could theoretically do at not the retreat in August, but another retreat where he comes in and presents that to the school committee?
Well, actually, I mean, what I might suggest is using that that virtual remote learning model. Maybe we have it asynchronous and synchronous, where part of it might be taped, and then maybe the discussion piece might be live in synchronous learning. So let me talk to him and see what he's planning. He's been working on it, and we can get back to you. We haven't planned a date for it yet.
Okay. Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, so I agree with Tom. I think it'd be great if we started with that book that the administration's reading. It'd be, there'd be some value in that. I would suggest actually we be a little bit more ambitious and maybe commit to reading 3 or 4 books over the next whatever period of time, right? And I don't mean like by August 13th or anything like that, but I worry a little bit that progress that we hope to make could be stunted by differences in understanding around, what racism is, the differences between anti-racism and being non-racist, right? So there probably are some other standout books that would be helpful for us all to read, kind of regardless of where we are on our personal journeys. White Fragility is probably one of them. I know Cheryl shared that. Cheryl shared that list of questions, discussion questions around white fragility, and the book White Fragility certainly would be an option for us as well. The other thing, and I know we're going to get into some of this, John, when you go through the update later on, but we are going to talk about goals on August 13th. I think we need to be, we need to be ambitious and aggressive about the goals we push with respect to equity, or about the goals we land on with respect to equity and equity in our schools. Certainly in the area of curriculum, which Tom, I appreciated that addition to the resolution, and then also in the area of hiring. What specifically are we going to do to try and diversify our workforce? We've got to sort of do some tangible things as well, and not just kind of read books and share our feelings. Those are valuable things to do. They'll get us all to kind of a common understanding and a level playing field, if you will. But we have to figure out some tangible things that we can do as a committee as well.
Okay. Aaron? You're on mute. Yep, there you go.
Sorry, I agree with all of that. I think the intent for tonight was to pick something to sort of get us off the ground, and it definitely sounds like this will be at least an aspect, if not a major focus of our retreat on the 13th. The other thing I wanted to share is that I know that the group Reading Embraces Diversity, in conjunction with the library, has been working on coordinating either like an all-community read, or maybe more of a focus like parent-teen read. But they're talking about probably doing the book Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram Kendi, which is there's sort of an adult version of that, and that this is more of the young adult version. But so if that comes to fruition, I think that would be a great thing for us as a school committee to participate in it as well. So I just wanted to put that on the radar.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? So, I guess, I don't know whether we decide tonight, which books to read. I think definitely the one that the staff is reading, and then maybe decide what else in addition to that. Why don't we just at least get started with John? If you can just text me or email me the author and all that. So
Yeah, we can take care of it.
We ordered them from Whiteland, so we can get them.
okay, great, thank you. Is there anything else anyone wanted to mention in that agenda item, or? No? Okay, Dr. Doherty.
Yes, thank you. So we wanted to give you another update on where we are. And as you can probably imagine, the information is coming in quickly in some ways, and then in other ways, it's not. And every time we feel that we have solved one problem, we open up 10 more questions. So in a lot of ways, it's been, I'll be honest, and I'll speak on behalf of everyone that's been working on this behind the scenes. It is at times frustrating because it's a hurry up and slow down, and it in terms of the information that we're getting from the state and other places. So what we want to do this evening is we want to give you as much information as we know. And again, we don't have all the answers, but I think you'll see that we are moving forward, and we are going in the right direction in terms of reopening school in the fall. Everything that we're talking about certainly is contingent on what happens over the next several weeks in the state. Right now, the infection rate is either holding steady or on a decline, a slight decline, which obviously is good. But as we know, and we've seen in other states, that can change very quickly. So we're going to obviously continue with doing our 3 plans. What we wanted to do this evening is quickly go over what the working groups are working on, the timelines that we have right now, some updates, which you will see a lot has been going on behind the scenes. And I want to end it by having a discussion of the 3 models that we're investigating and forming, and the advantages and disadvantages of each of those, and how that's going to play into the reopening in the fall. So current working groups, there is a continuity of learning working group, which Chris is leading, a remote learning platform working group, which Chris is leading as well, meeting the needs of all students, which Jen Stice is leading, the social emotional support and transition group, which Jen Allard and Mary Juliana are leading, communication operations, which Gail is leading, and then one that we are currently putting together that is more going to focus on the human resource piece internally is a response team, because there will be a lot of potential human resource issues that are going to emerge from the models that we choose. So the continuity of learning, what we are looking at here, and then as I mentioned, this is Chris's team. We're proposing what tools going to need purchasing, and Chris is going to talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. The tools that we're going to be using, the resources that we're going to be available. Also, they're identifying the curriculum standards that are going to be focused on, both in physical school and virtual school model, and how we're going to transition to the new school year. They're going to be developing systems on how to make sure that all learners are engaged, including our ELL students, students with disabilities, and economically disadvantaged, and developing the training and the professional development. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things that the state has been communicating to us about how this can be done. The Remote Learning Platform Committee is really just what it says. It's investigating, proposing a remote learning platform for the fall with tools so that there's a consistency among the schools and the levels. Regardless, we do believe at some point we're going to be in some sort of remote learning environment, whether it be a hybrid, completely remote, or just using it as part of a learning platform tool for in-person. And down the road, perhaps this can be a model that we can use for snow days. Meeting the needs of all learners, which is the group that Jen is leading. What are the instructional and related service models that might most be effective to reach all types of learners? How do we support staff to reduce stress and problem solve the challenges that are associated with remote and or hybrid teaching and learning? How do we support parents? What are the most appropriate models for assessment and evaluation? And then identifying the role of paraeducators in all 3 models. Certainly it will look different regardless of the model, what the role of a paraeducator will be in this new education world. The social emotional support in transition, which is Jen Allard and Mary Juliana, and her teams, their teams are going to focus on how they're going to transition staff and students back in the fall, what tools and training will we need, looking at how do we transition teachers that are new to the district, who have never taught in Reading, and maybe it's their very first teaching experience, and if it's some sort of remote setting, how do we acclimate them to that? Creating a refresher course on youth mental health first aid, which a large number of our staff are taking and have taken, and then review what screening tools we'll be using for students in the fall from a social emotional standpoint as they re-enter. And then the communication and operations group is pretty much what the title is. So how are we communicating with staff and community members? what CDC guidelines that will be following and impacting on the opening of school, reviewing the PPE needs, cleaning and disinfecting procedures for technology in classrooms and schools, which would include the review of current custodian schedules, reviewing ventilation and air quality standards, identifying isolation rooms per DESE requirements. We are going to need to have an additional isolation room in each school, separate from the nurse's office. A classroom space review, which we are undergoing right now for the fall opening. Food service plan for summer and fall. Technology infrastructure and device need, and any procurement and budget items associated with those needs, and how can we strategically spend the resources that have been allocated to address those needs. And then the response team is really taking a look at all of the different types of human resource leaves regarding reopening and any associated end dates. We are in foreign territory with this. This has obviously never happened before, so leaves are a little bit complicated. We do have what's in the contracts, the collective bargaining agreements, but we also have FMLA. We have the Family First Act, which it continues until the end of December right now. Developing appropriate forms for those leaves, assessing current staffing levels, and if staffing needs to be reallocated or added within for the different models. How can we cross-train staff for more flexibility? Taking a look at work hours and shifts and see if we have to change any of those shifts for different support staff, accommodations that may be needed for staff who are at risk, reviewing the use of substitute teachers and plan for training, and make recommendations for any staffing changes. So that would be the response team work. So I'll stop there and take any questions on this section. Probably Chuck is the best way to do this.
Okay. John, I have a question. So with all of this, is what we're thinking we need to do track with the budget that we just approved? Or do you think is going to be a shortcoming or not, or you don't know that yet?
We don't know that yet, and we're not getting a lot of definition from the state either of what's available, because I think they're waiting for what could be coming from the federal government. So it's kind of a domino effect.
Right. Tom?
Yes, thanks, John, for this so far. Somewhat in line with the teacher's email that we received, and also I've heard some mixed messages from some parents and their students about ventilation and air conditioning at the high school in particular. I'm wondering if you could, quickly recap off the top of your head, or if not, that's fine. But what is the situation with air conditioning and ventilation, air conditioning in particular, at each of our schools? And do you know of how many rooms we have that don't have windows or any sort of outside ventilation that could help in situations like we might be facing?
So right now we're currently doing, and Gail will talk a little bit about this with the space needs, we're currently doing an analysis of all of our rooms. So, I don't want to say off the top of my head, how many rooms we have, how many without windows or with windows. I will tell you that our ventilation systems are up to speed. They go through a very stringent preventive maintenance program with our facilities department. And I think sometimes people equate ventilation and heat and air quality and with the virus, and it's two totally different issues. Heat and ventilation are two totally different things. So I know that Joe Huggins takes the ventilation piece very seriously and has for years. We do not have large amounts of air conditioning in our schools. A lot of school districts do not have a lot of air conditioning. And at the high school, which is the school that you mentioned, I do not believe any of the classrooms have air conditioning. But our ventilation system is undergoes a very stringent process year-round. We have an outside contractor that works on the ventilation systems for the preventive maintenance. We use a very high-grade filter, which we upgraded a few years ago for all of our unit vents, both in schools and towns. So, you know, I can give you that much information right now, if that's helpful.
That is helpful, and maybe Gail will address this as well later on. But if since we don't have air conditioning, I think the concern is not necessarily heat versus cold, although the heat does impact it. But if you have something on your face all day long, the heat feels more severe. So ventilation obviously is helping to keep the air moving, but also, as you said, filtering out certain things. But are we considering things like fans or other things to improve the air movement and reduce the perception or feeling of being constrained by the mask in front of your face?
So we're taking a look at all of that, Tom, right now. I don't want to comment on things where I don't have enough information, and I also don't want to make promises that we can't deliver on.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, John.
So a little bit about the timelines, and again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, please don't hold us to these timelines where we're going to do the best we can. And it seems like every time we have a meeting with the commissioner, things tend to change. I had a conversation, part of a conversation today with a group of superintendents with the commissioner, and there's a lot of guidance that we've not received yet, although as you know, we did receive the special ed guidance this evening. So, and I know Jen's going to talk a little bit about that. So the ongoing activities, which are happening every week, we are meeting weekly during the summer this year as a DLT. We have never done that before. Usually summer is a time where the pace is a little bit different, but we realize that that's obviously not going to be able to be the case this year. And the focus of our meetings are really twofold. We're focusing on equity and social justice and return to school. Those are really the two major focal points of our discussions. We have the working groups going on. I've been holding virtual office hours, and you'll see later on that I've already had 15 people sign up for those, combination of staff and families, and have had a few of those 15 meetings already. We've been meeting with the CPAC group, and we'll be continuing that during the summer. I know we're trying to schedule one for next week now that the guidelines have come out. Extended school year is starting, and Jen's going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. The Birch Meadow Modular Classroom Project, the Coolidge Boiler Project, the security projects, which are happening at Coolidge, Parker, and RMHS this summer, all of the routine preventative maintenance work, and then the summer food distribution, which I know Gail's going to talk a little bit about later. So all those things are going on every week. So this week, in addition to the working groups, we have begun discussions and plans regarding athletics, extracurricular, band, chorus, and drama. We are going to be receiving some guidance from the department, hopefully next week or the week after, but these areas are going to look different next year because of the uniqueness of the different programs. I mean, athletics, I think, is self-explanatory just based on what we're hearing, how difficult it is for the professional teams to get back on track. And obviously, the MIA has been developing a series of recommendations that they will be presenting to the state, and we're hoping to hear from them soon. They did send out a survey 2 weeks ago, I believe, to superintendents and other stakeholders to get their feelings on this. Extracurricular, band, chorus, and drama, because of singing and particularly the playing of brass instruments, there is a lot of saliva that's produced. and other airborne particles. So there is going to probably be some guidance on what that's going to look like. These are also areas that have a major impact on schedules. For those of you that have children in middle school or high school, you know how band and chorus drive the schedule during the day. So it's how this looks is going to have an impact on the schedules. We began to analyze floor plans and square footage capacity. Gail's going to talk a little bit about that later. Certainly, we have the meeting tonight, which has been a lot of good discussion on some of the topics that we've been focused on ourselves. We are working on a specialist schedule primarily at the elementary level, which is going to be key for some of the different models that we are going to be having. And then, of course, we have weekly communication. I am working on something that will probably go out either tomorrow or Saturday, similar to the other 3 updates that I've sent out regarding the fall. Next week is a very busy week. Several of us are going to be attending the MASS conference virtually, and 2 topics are going to be focused on equity and return to school. So it's very similar to what our focus areas are. The floor plans are going to be analyzed, continue to be analyzed. We're hoping to get some information by the end of next week. We're updating our Reading Police Department MOU because now that Chief Clark has been appointed, we need to update that. My goal is to send out student and staff surveys regarding preference for the fall next week, which will be analyzed the following week. The working groups are going to make some initial presentations to the district leadership team. And then obviously this is all going to be contingent on the additional information we get from DESE. So the week of the 20th, the second round of family and staff surveys will be analyzed. Principals are now working on schedules for in-person models and hybrid models. I am going to communicate some virtual community forum opportunities, which I'll talk a little bit about in a future slide, which will give opportunities for staff and families to give feedback, express concerns as much as possible. Week of the 27th, we have graduation. That was communicated to senior parents this past week. We did get approval from the Board of Health on Monday for the plan, so we're ready to go on that. We are hoping that we're going to get some DESE guidance the week of the 27th. We were told it's going to probably be July 31st, and that will be the final fall guidance, is what we're being told. We will then subsequently be needing to start MOA negotiations. You've probably heard in the news that the statewide unions are negotiating with the commissioner on some topics. So we're hopefully going to get some guidance on that as well. The Title IX law is changing. So we are bringing Michael Joyce in to talk to us, administrators, about the changes on that. And we are going to, by the previous MOAs, need to make all of our personnel and staffing decisions by July 31st in all of the non-teaching bargaining units. The week of August 3rd, a lot of decisions are going to have to be made on things like, well, at least we hope, based on what we're seeing right now from when we're supposed to be getting more guidance. On athletics, extracurricular, band, drama, transportation plan will need to be finalized. What we're hearing right now is, in terms of bus transportation, that all students will need to be wearing masks regardless of age, and there will be a 3-foot physical distance, which essentially is 1 student per seat. So that is going to impact our regular special ed and MECO bus transportation and homeless transportation. We will also be finalizing our extended day plans. The principals will be finalizing their schedules for all 3 models. We've been told by DESE, and I should say this, we've been told by DESE today, the commission has said we should not be putting any plans out there that this is what we're going to do until early August, because the information continues to change so quickly. The in-person room configuration plans will be finalized, the hybrid plans will be finalized, the remote learning plans will be finalized, and we are going to be planning our teacher training at this point as well. Oh, I have weekly communication down twice, sorry. The week of August 10th, we're going to have our own retreat. It's going to focus on equity and return to school. We may put out a number 3 family and staff survey at this point, and then right now we have the school committee meeting on August 13th. And then the week of the 17th, final planning and implementation. We, at this point, would also like to reconvene, report to the graduate design team and get that moving again. Right now, the NEASC site visit has been moved to the spring, so we haven't lost any time on this. We may have more community forums for staff and families this week. The staff training will be finalized by this week. And then the week of the 24th will be our teacher induction week for new teachers. Most likely it'll be virtual. And then the 31st, this week, and this is one of the things that we're waiting word from DESE, it is possible that they will be shortening the 180-day school year requirement to 175 or 177, and those additional days would be used for staff training in preparation for the fall reopening. What that would mean is that we would have this week, which would be 5 days, most likely for training, and then school would be starting for students most likely after Labor Day. But this is all right now in the planning stages, and we're waiting for word from the commissioner on if there will be a relaxation of the 180 to 177 or 175. So I'll stop there.
John, do you, what seems like there's an echo here. What comes out on July 31st? Is that a guidance, or is that this is what you're doing, it's not negotiable? It's unclear to me whether they're making recommendations and then we can, you know, live within those guidelines but do what we want to do. How does that work? John? You're on mute.
I don't know why I was muted. Chuck, that's a great question, and I wish I had an easy answer. There are some things that are going to be non-negotiable. There are other things that are not going to be non-negotiable. So one thing, if let's say we have to go to a hybrid model to start the year. My understanding is a hybrid model will be, we will get to decide the hybrid model. But we may be told we have to do a hybrid model. We would decide what it would look like. So we're supposed to receive final guidance this week, which is supposed to build upon the initial fall guidance that we received 2 weeks ago.
So I understand that it's important to get community feedback and with the surveys and stuff, but if we have to do what the state says, what can we do that we get? So the surveys are maybe asking us to do something different. What will be the value of the surveys if we're not going to be able to respond to requests in them?
Well, the survey is going to help us. So, for example, one of the things that we know is that there are going to be a population of students that are not going to be coming back if we're in person. That families may choose not to send their children back, which means that they're going to be remote. So that would be important information that we could gather from a survey. So we did that. We did ask those questions it's the first survey, but it may change based on, now perceptions are changing as we move further into the summer. Same with staff. We're going to have to get more feedback from staff on what their comfort level is about returning or not returning. So these are all things that a survey would help us with. And the comments from the first survey were very valuable. And I presented to you the themes in the last presentation. The comments are very, very helpful in identifying themes, and the community forums, I would assume we're going to get similar comments that will help us as well. So you're right. I mean, there are some things we're not going to have control over, but it's good to know what some of the challenges are going to be so that we can try to address them.
Yeah. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Chuck. John, I wanted to ask a couple of questions about kindergarten and full day versus half day in particular, and I know there's a lot TBD here around the specifics of the models, but is there a particular timeline for parents to opt out of full day who have planned to be in full day at this point? So that's the first question.
There isn't. There isn't a
Okay.
date at this point. Now, I mean, full day and half day will look different no matter what model we're using next year.
So that was the second question and maybe you can say a little bit more, again, I know we don't have nearly all the answers, but maybe you can say a little bit more when we get to the models later. I think it'd be helpful if we could help people understand the difference or some of the anticipated differences between full day and half day under the different models. Because what I want to avoid is a situation where, by necessity, we're waiting until early to mid-August to say anything definitive about what the return to school is going to look like, and we have people, because of the uncertainty associated with that, opting out of full-day kindergarten who might otherwise prefer it or who have otherwise chosen it, so to the degree that we can hit on some of that tonight, I think it might be helpful.
Sure, I'll try.
Yeah, I know there's only so much we can say, but I think even the commitment that the two are going to look different in any model is probably better than where a lot of people have assumed we would be.
Thanks, Sean. Carla?
Hi, Dr. Doherty. A couple questions for you, probably both loaded questions. I've heard a lot of stress, obviously, surrounding parents and determining what's going to happen next year because they need to make plans for working themselves and, children and daycare and things like that. And I know that concern is with teachers as well, with younger children. Is my understanding correct that decision is going to be made at the beginning of August? And that's when it's going to be promulgated to the community of what the plans are for the fall opening? I mean, do we have a date that we're going to let people know what truly is going to happen?
My hope is to do it the first week of August, but I'm really at the will right now of the state.
So the state
That's why we're working on 3 different plans.
Right, and I can't even imagine the complexity of all of them. So you come up with the 3 plans, you're getting closer to that date, you're going to be given guidance or direction as to what will happen, and I'm assuming that it will relate to COVID numbers. And then we go ahead with that plan?
Well, it's not just COVID numbers, and I'll explain this when I talk about the 3 models. We're trying to figure out if we can do the in-person model right now with the 3-foot distancing. So
Okay.
we're doing a classroom by classroom analysis. We have to figure that out.
Right.
So it's not just the virus numbers, which, yes, that's certainly a part of it, but it's can we absolutely do an in-person model? So we're working on that right now.
And a follow-up question too for graduation. From what was sent out on graduation, the student and 2 members of their family are being allowed in. Is there a reason for just 2 family members and not immediate family members being allowed to go to graduation?
That actually came, DESE produced some requirements, which they consulted with DPH from in mid-May, and those are the guidelines.
Why did I think that DESE or DPH said immediate families?
And then the Board of Health, and the Board of Health was concerned about the density of the numbers that we were allowing in with our plan, but let it go when they knew that it was going to be the 6 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
But if they're relying on information from May might as well have been 100 years ago.
No, it wasn't from May, Chuck. The guidance came out in May, and there was a set of requirements prior to July 18th, and there was a set of requirements after July 18th, which is why we picked after July 18th so that we could have an in-person graduation.
Okay. Tom?
So thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Dr. Doherty. I'm reading those requirements now because I was getting asked the same question, and it says attendance must be limited to graduates and their immediate family members only. So family members that are 4, for example, the parents and the brother or sister would be technically eligible per this document. So if we could double check that and assuage family members, that would be good to know.
Right, but we would not be able to put more than 2 family members in the graduate on the football field.
So it's a space issue.
Yes, as I mentioned on Monday when the Board of Health approved it, they approved it knowing that this was what we were going to do. They were concerned with what we were presenting because of the number of people we were already allowing to attend.
Okay. Okay.
May I jump in? Is it a space issue because of the Turf 1? And are we can we move that could you move it to a different space to be able to allow those numbers?
That's our biggest space.
I'm thinking more of the Castine fields, not the turf fields, but the Birch Meadow
Chuck,
field.
I'm not, Chuck, I don't want to, I'm just not sure if we want to, I mean, this is really a plan that was developed by the high school principal and approved by the Board of Health, so I'm not sure what more I can say about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the horse is out of the barn. I mean, we can't go against whatever the Board of Health approved at this point, right? Yeah, so.
Right.
Couple more questions, if you don't mind, Chuck.
Sure.
John, you mentioned the Title IX presentation that Michael Joyce is going to give the staff. Can a summary of that be sent to us as well? I'm asking in particular because we have 4 policies that specifically refer to Title IX. It would be good to understand, in concert with MASC and others, what, if anything, we need to change in those policies as a result of the change that's happening.
Sure.
And then my last question was the transportation mention about 1 child per seat, and somewhat aligned to Chuck's question before about budget. Are we expecting that we're going to need additional buses to bring students in if we go to near capacity? If the 3 feet allows us to get there, that would require us to get new buses, or do we expect our bus ridership is so low that it doesn't really matter at the current time? I'm particularly thinking our Metco buses we might need more of those in particular.
Yeah, and those are all things that, again, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we're supposed to be getting specific transportation guidance from DESE next week or the week after, which is supposed to answer a lot of these questions.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I wish I had a better answer on that.
All right, it's all evolving, right?
Right.
Everything's,
Okay, no one else? Keep going, John, or?
I can keep going, sure.
Oh, yeah, no, I thought you had more, so.
No, yes, we do. So now we're going to give you some updates on what has been happening and where is going to be going on moving forward. I'm going to have Jen start it off by talking about some special ed updates.
Hi, good evening, everybody. So first of all, we've had a very busy week this week, and so much collaboration between central office staff, our families, and the staff and the building leaders. It's been amazing. Just a few highlights before I get into the extended school year. We did submit our circuit breaker claims today. With yeoman's work from Sharon Stewart and Anne-Marie Foley, who really helped us put everything together. Allison and I have a plan for next year, how we'll be collecting the data more in real time, and we are very excited about that. As John mentioned, we got guidance today from DESE regarding special ed services. I've already sent that out to our committee working on all learners. And as I told them in the email, I was so proud of the work we've done because we've really kind of captured in our essential questions a lot of what the state is asking us to make sure we're thinking about. How do we service our students who have special needs? How are we servicing students who are homeless, who may be driving a long distance from other communities, and how do we make sure they have what they need in all of our models? So we'll continue to review that, and as John mentioned, I reached out to the CPAC as well to go over that with them so that we are really, as a district, on the same page and making sure that we are together going through this. And it really does speak to the overlap amongst all of our groups and how we are all working together. I'm sure Gail will mention how we've been walking through buildings. Yesterday, Allison, Bright, Gail, Joe, some of our architects walked through every building with us, with our building leaders, either in person or virtually, and looked at every special education space so that as our subcommittee is meeting, we can really look at what do we need to make sure students can be successful. And everyone has been so supportive and helpful as we have these really difficult conversations, which really leads us to our summer programming, where we have just, really this is the first time students have been, we've been getting ready for students and teachers to be in school in several months. So this week was our first week of summer programming, and all students were remotely being serviced. However, for the high needs population, students who are in substantially separate programs with multiple therapies, and were not able to access any remote learning by virtue of their disability, they will be joining us next week. And the staff did an amazing job Monday and Wednesday, being in the building at Birch Meadow and one classroom at Coolidge, teaching remotely in their PPE, walking the students around virtually to see how they will enter and what school will look like, because it's going to be very different for them and very different for their families. And I cannot thank the staff enough for doing this really challenging work and coming in and wearing all of their PPE and getting their students used to it. Mary Juliana has been amazing in terms of training the staff, making sure that they are comfortable. And Allison has just been amazing in terms of getting the scheduling done and working with Gail and Joe to make sure we have the right PPE. The town has even worked with us for additional custodial help so that we make sure we are able to clean all touch surfaces, because the guidance is very stringent for summer school. So even after every time a bathroom is used, there need to be cleaned. And so we're trying to figure out what that will look like. Next week, that small group of students will be joining us in person 2 days a week. And we will continue to update as we are able to bring in more students. We will try to do that as the summer goes on, and we will continue to monitor the state guidance and make appropriate adjustments. And if people should be expecting continuation of learning plans, which are being sent via email to families. If people have any questions, please reach out to myself or Allison or the person delivering the services, and we really would like to work with you. And once again, I just can't stress what an amazing team effort this has been, working with the central office staff and their teams with Chris Kelly to make sure that we have the curriculum we need, and Jen Allard, that we are including all the appropriate social emotional supports, and every building leader that is working with us, and Gail and John for their support with the budget and the PPE and the staff. So thank you to everyone, and we will continue to update you as we get more guidance.
Okay. I'm going to have Chris talk a little bit about curriculum.
Hi, everyone. I know a few meetings ago we did a pretty lengthy presentation on some curriculum upgrades in Reading that are scheduled for the coming year. We thought that it might be the time to do some macro looking at all of the different curriculum purchases. I'm actually going to highlight the ones that allow us to be versatile and nimble. So that as we plan for the 3 models, as John said, we have lots of flexibility and training and tools in our toolbox for our staff. I would be remiss in adding, same as Jen, that this is a huge team effort. So many hours went into vetting vendors, working with staff to get information from different vendors, piloting programs, also even just the ordering process. There's a lot to it. So kudos to Gail, Chris Schweitzer, and her team. My administrative assistant, Lori Miller, who did a lot of the purchase order work for the very first time. So it really, I think we are really building systems that didn't exist in the collaborative nature of doing this work. So thank you to everyone involved. Also, the building principals have been unbelievable, working with the leadership team and as well as our learning and teaching team at really giving input. So some of the things that we really are going to highlight tonight is the social studies and English Newsella. If you're not familiar with Newsella, it's a wonderful online tool that will be available for all K-12 teachers. Although it's primarily our curated version, and that's what we are focusing on, which is they're going to help us put together packages based on our curriculum guides and our units in social studies and English. We originally looked into this for grades 5 and 8 because the new social studies frameworks, there aren't a lot of book resources that really align to the civics units in the way that we wanted to teach it. So we approached Newsella because we could really work with them to curate the package that we wanted. In our discussions and really through our remote learning process, we started really talking about what would this look like if these tools were available to all of our teachers. What's really for me, a hallmark of the Newsella program is that all of their materials are differentiated and come with differentiated models so that teachers really have lots of resources. A lot of them are articles, some of them are short stories, and they're on a variety of topics, a lot of current events, a lot of science articles, math, and as I said, we specifically targeted the social studies and English for some curated tools. The other thing I wanted to mention were the last two things, the science formative assessment probes and professional text and our math formative assessment probes. Knowing that we are going to have to do a fair amount of formative testing that may even look more robust than in other years, we felt that this was a great way to offer some of these materials so that when we come in, we can do a very brief dipsticking that allow us for that versatility and nimbleness. And these are our curriculum purchases at the district level. At the high school level, and I know I covered this in my presentation, we are really excited about our new social studies tool. And I just want to give a shout out to the social studies department at the high school that vetted many different tools. In the end, they settled on the National Geographic that will work as their major online tool, and books. We also have the books to go with it because they really felt like that would best work to bolster the programming that they already have. One of the nice things about Reading High is we already did an integrated social studies model, so adapting to the new state frameworks wasn't a huge jump. We were one of the few districts that had that option, but we're really excited about the National Geographic model. We use it in sixth and seventh this year, and we really love the online piece. And again, thinking should we need to go remote or hybrid model, this will give us many, many options. I also talked about the Algebra 1 tool, which also, again, has a robust online presence in addition to the books that we purchased. We already covered that. John, next slide. Middle school, you can see we have kind of a lot of resources developed here. Some are new to us and some are specifically targeted towards the sort of unknown that we're looking at. Our Algebra 1 tool I just mentioned, our social studies and English tool, which is Newsella. In addition, we did buy some coding and computer science resources. You'll see that at the elementary level as well. Just a little caveat on that. Kathy Santilli, who is our ITS at the elementary schools this year, did a pilot with iRobot and really loved what they used in that. It's called the ROOT program, R-U-T-E. And so we decided to buy some piloting resources to see if we could really teach coding as part of our technology support. Just so you know, our tech staff don't even know that yet. If they're watching, hi. We were able to purchase this. We had really a lot of excitement around this and hope to be able to purchase it, and then when we could, we will be working with them. The first bullet on this is an ELA tool that was offered for free this year, and some of our middle school teachers used it, Actively Learn. It is a learning platform that has a lot of books, whole books. We purchased it for the middle school level for both 6th and 8th. It also has obviously some lessons and activities, but what we loved about it is that if we do go to a remote environment, rather than having to have kids come into school to get certain books, say everyone's using the same title, they would be able to use the Actively Learn format and the model for that. But obviously it has much more use beyond that. Next slide, John. I know I mentioned this I didn't say what the name of it was at the last meeting because we hadn't yet reached out to all of our reading specialists and our principals, our district leaders, but we did end up building beyond our Lexia intervention, which we already use as an intervention tool, an assessment, online assessment, but we also purchased the early literacy screening component of it this year. We are going to pilot it. As you know, the state hasn't really developed a list of what they suggest with that, and rather than wait to see, we know the Lexia suite, we've had good luck with it, it gets high ranks, and we decided to purchase the early literacy screening tool for this year. Newsella will also be available to elementaries. The science and social studies texts are building more anchor texts for teachers for class lessons. Again, you see the coding and computer science resources that I mentioned. We also build our own science program. Heather Leonard curates our K-2 units and actually buys all the materials and assembles them, obviously, with a lot of coordination with Gail and Chris Schweitzer in our procurement department. But that is an annual cost that we incur, but we've definitely added to that over time so that we feel really good about our science program at the K-2 level. I think that's all I have.
Yes, thanks, Chris. So just a little bit about communication.
Thanks, Chris.
Just a little bit about communication, and then I'm going to turn the next section over to Gail. So as you know, we've been really focused on trying to put out information as we're receiving it, even though it may not be the final information on a topic. So we've sent out 10 different communications since the closing of school regarding fall reopening. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've had 15 people sign up so far for virtual office hours, which has been great, and we've had some really good conversations. And then what I'm planning on doing the week of the 20th is to have virtual community forums to answer any questions or hear concerns, which would include level staff meetings, certainly the CPAC, as Jen mentioned, level family meetings, and also meeting with our Boston parents. And we will continue to find ways to provide opportunities for families and staff to communicate throughout the summer, because we do know, and I think, Carla, you said it, everyone is anxious, and which I completely understand, and we'll do everything we can to keep people informed on what's going on. So now I'm going to turn it over to Gail, and she's going to talk about some operations updates that have been going on.
Great, thank you, John. I wanted to start with a quick update, and just to sort of level set, the goal for my update tonight was to really keep it high level, sort of the 6,000 foot overview. We do plan to have Joe Huggins available for the next meeting or the meeting after that, as we get closer to having our actual plans laid out, just to make sure if there are specific questions that are a little bit more detailed, that we have the right people available to answer. But I will do my best facilities impersonation to answer any questions that come up after I look at my slides. So the first one we did want to talk about is we have spent a lot of time with our PPE ordering. Again, to echo what Jen and Chris have said, this is definitely a very collaborative approach. They don't joke when they say this takes a village. We received the guidance from DESE about what our numbers might be. We worked very closely with the facilities department. I've spent a lot of time with Jen and Mary on the special ed side of it. I am very happy to let the committee know we made significant progress at year end with a lot of the transfers that were approved with our ordering. We did order a significant number of disposable masks. We were able to get both adult and child size. And I wish I would have put pictures in here with what the field house currently looks like, with all of the pallets of PPE that have been delivered in the past couple of weeks. Working very closely with Jen and Mary, we were able to also procure, I want to say, close to about 6,000 clear masks. We ordered them from 2 different vendors to try them out. These will be specifically used for the special ed population. We're trying them out right now during the ESY program. We ordered the gloves. We have gowns on order, which really are for the nurses and other personnel that will be working with high-risk students. This is one area where we do have additional purchasing to do. The gowns and gloves and goggles are back ordered. They've been very hard to come by. A lot of our orders were not accepted at year end, so we are continuing to work on that. Face shields, again, those are for those employees working with higher risk students. And to let folks know, we do have enough PPE for all of our needs for the ESY program. So we did prioritize that, so they do have the face shields and the gowns there. We have goggles ordered for all of the nurses. We were able to order, I would say, close to a year's supply of the KN95 masks. As folks may be aware, the N95 masks are really geared towards the emergency response individuals, so we're not able to get those, but we were able to get certified KN95 masks. We do know that the hand sanitizer will be a very big item for next year, so we did order 300 dispensing units that will be getting installed in all of the classrooms as well as high traffic areas. And we also ordered a significant amount of hand sanitizer. Currently, we are working on a storage solution for where we will keep this material. We're also working on what our process will be to distribute the material. We want to make sure we have a good understanding of what we're using and how quickly we're going through the inventory so we can make sure we're getting out ahead of it. So I'm working very closely with Kevin Gerstner, Joe Huggins, as well as Jen Stice to make sure we have a good process to track how we're utilizing the information. We're also continuing to monitor the market to make sure that as opportunities present themselves, we're able to purchase additional supplies. Right now, we are focused on getting additional gowns, and just this week we did order another batch of face shields that we feel will position us for the rest of the year. So we do feel we're in good shape with the latest guidance that we have. In addition to the PPE, we've also been looking at all of our other areas. I worked very closely with Mary as well as Danielle to make sure we were thinking about what their world will look like in this new environment. So we did order carts for both health services and food services to allow them to be more mobile. As we are hearing, the recent guidance is that the food services may be more a serve in the classroom model. So we wanted to make sure they had the ability to get the meals to the students, as well as if the nurses need to be more mobile, especially as we set up isolation rooms. So we did order enough carts for all buildings. The other area we spent a lot of time on is in the technology area. In addition to doing our regular technology replenishment, we also ordered a significant number of one-to-one devices in case we are in a remote learning environment. We wanted to make sure we had enough inventory available to outfit the students, especially as we know more parents may be going back to work, so the shared device model may not work as well as it did since March. We also have ordered 2 different types of cameras for synchronous learning that we are piloting. We did order enough to outfit several classes in each building, so we will be working on getting those set up as well as training over the summer. And we also were able to order hotspots for families, but that may not have wireless access at home, so we felt we made significant progress to ensure that all students had access if we are in a remote environment. As we updated the committee at the last meeting, we did roll out our seamless summer food distribution, and we did want to let the committee know that it has been a success. We have seen about a 3 times increase. 2 weeks ago, we served 122 families on our Tuesday distribution. I believe this week we were up to 146 meals, and just to put that in perspective, that equates to over 2,000 weekly meals that we distributed in one day. So I do have to thank Danielle again for doing this. We have called in some additional food services staff, and I have to once again give a shout out to the custodial staff, who I have to say have helped us out for the past 3 weeks to make sure we have the coverage we need to help bring the boxes out to the cars for the families. And we definitely are continuing to see a pretty significant increase in the needs as we're going into the summer months. As John and Jen mentioned, we are doing the classroom space study. So we spent, I want to say, 2.5 days this week walking all of the buildings. So what we have done is we are going building to building, almost room by room, looking at the capacity of the rooms. We are looking at it twofold. We did the regular ed space just to look at the capacity of each room. It is very detailed. We're going into the rooms. We're looking at the layout of the rooms. We're looking at the types of furniture that's currently in the rooms. We're also taking into account any built-in features in the rooms that cannot be utilized for student space. So if they have wall units, if they have built-ins, to try to look at how to maximize the space, looking at various scenarios, whether it's 3 feet or 6 feet. Shout out to Jen and Allison. I think on the hottest day this week, we walked every single building to look at all of the special ed space. So we started first thing in the morning, and I think we finished at Parker at about 5 o'clock that night, where we met with each principal either in person or virtually, where we held up the phone so they could walk us through the space, where we documented not only the size of the room, how it's utilized, the ideal type of furniture that's utilized, as well as thoughts on what we could do. As part of this, we're also being very open-minded to look at space to make sure that if we have a large space with a small number of students, are we able to shift space around to maximize it? We're looking at gymnasiums, cafeterias, libraries, and really doing a very detailed approach. So we hope to have information next week that we will be circling back with Jen and Allison, as well as all of the principals, to make sure we haven't missed anything. And we're also working very closely with facilities to make sure we have a plan for storage for any of the extra furniture that may come out as part of this, because the goal will be, to the extent possible, to remove furniture that is not needed, but we do not want to get rid of the furniture or declare it as surplus, because ideally this is maybe a 1-year issue, so we want to have places to put the furniture to bring it back into the buildings as we're allowed to do that. And then I think we're, looking at it 2 ways to say what does, and these are some high level numbers, they're really back of the envelope calculations to look at the square foot of a room, what the maximum occupancy could be if you look at a 3-foot distance as well as a 6-foot distance, taking into account the number of, where it gets tricky, which is why we walked all of the spaces, understanding in a classroom how many children and adults are in the classroom, because you need to account for not just the students in their desks, but the number of teachers and paraprofessionals. And we're also assessing some of the other services that are provided, whether those would be in the classroom, out of the classroom, as we try to limit movement. So as you can imagine, it's a pretty complex, detailed calculation that we're trying to do and look at every scenario. We're also looking at making sure we have all of the appropriate signage throughout the buildings. We do know that we've always historically had cover your mouth when you cough, hand washing, but we're also making sure, working with Mary as well as Maya, our insurance company, to get additional signage that's required regarding wearing a face mask, proper hand washing. We're also continuing to look at the various plexi shields throughout the building. We've done a lot of work. We got some great information through the setup of ESY for some of the individual testing that's being done. Jen was very kind to walk Joe Huggins and myself through a couple of scenarios. We've come up with a couple of ideas to install additional safety shields. For that, we're working very closely with Danielle for food services for what that might look like. We also are working with our janitorial. We have a contracted janitorial company that we utilize at the high school as well as Coolidge Middle School. They are coming out next week to do detailed training for our custodial staff to walk through some of the new chemicals and cleaning agents that we're using. This was definitely a little too much information for me, but they're coming out to do mock bathroom cleanings and high-touch surfaces. So we've already started some of the, which I will not be attending that training, the training associated with that to make sure everybody is up to speed. Mary did training for the custodial staff that's working the ESY program. So we are definitely doing everything we can to make sure the training's in place, the PPE's in place, and all of the safety measures are in place. And as we mentioned, as part of what we're doing, we're also reviewing the safety of each room from a variety of factors. I know, Tom, as you mentioned, the air conditioning, the ceiling fans, the ventilation, we are going through that on a case-by-case situation as well, and that'll be all part of our report that we're giving so that we're looking at all the space and utilizing it to the best capacity. So I think that is everything I had.
Thank you, Gail.
So I have one more slide in this section and then take questions for this section, Chuck, if you want. So as I mentioned earlier, one of our major areas of focus has been equity and social justice work, and it's going to continue. I know there are several schools in the district that are doing book groups this summer with staff, virtually, of course. As I mentioned earlier, the district leadership team is reading and discussing the book Everyday Anti-Racism, Getting Real About Race in School. So that is going to be our major focus for a book reading piece this summer. I mentioned earlier most of us are attending the MASS conference next week. We will be conducting focus groups later in the summer to hear concerns and assess needs on this topic. And we know that this is going to be a goal in our school and district improvement plans for this upcoming year. So we are definitely moving forward in this area as well as the fall reopening. So I'll take questions at this point.
Committee have any questions? John Parks.
Yeah, I'm going to slide back to Gail's info on one-to-one and hotspots. Gail, how many new systems are we looking at receiving, and how will those be distributed? Is it, needs-based, obviously, first?
It will be needs-based. That is how we handled it since March, John. So we actually, I want to say we ordered almost 700 one-to-one devices. I believe we ordered about 20 hotspots, and that was sort of based upon what we thought the need might be. So we based what we purchased on what we were handing out and what we were hearing might be the need going forward. And I want to say we ordered about 100 cameras to distribute throughout all of the schools for the learning if we're in a remote standpoint. But even still, one of the items that we are fortunate is because we did order the replacement computers, before we would declare the other ones as surplus, that would free up those to be utilized in addition to the one-to-one devices that we purchased. I will say one of the items I did not mention is I worked very closely with Jen Stiles as well to make sure we ordered additional iPads, computers, and assistive devices. Correct me if I'm wrong with that, Jen, for the special education population as well, to make sure we had extra items. And part of what we were also considering, John, with that is to try to have enough devices so that if they are used in the classroom, we limit how many students are sharing some of those adaptive technology devices as well. So we really tried to think all of that through when we were ordering these items.
Thank you.
And the other part that I did want to mention too, as part of the signage, we are working very closely to try to get the 6-foot distancing, the one-way hallway. So we are ordering a lot of those markings as well to try to visually get the social distancing.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, John. It doesn't.
Okay. And I know this has gone a little bit longer, but I feel that everything we're talking about is important as we continue to navigate through this summer. So you've seen this diagram before. I showed it to you the last time we did a presentation. And I was saying this to some of the principals today. We're actually going to have to make 4 schedules. Someday, when a vaccine is available and we are back to some sort of normalcy, we are going to have a schedule that will look like probably what we were doing a year ago. But we're not even there yet, and we're not even considering that yet. But we are focusing our time and energy right now on 3 models. The in-person learning, and you heard a lot of the pieces leading up to this part of the presentation that we're doing to prepare for that, with the space analysis and ordering of materials, curriculum, and PPE, and all of that. The hybrid learning model, which is going, students learn both in person and remotely, and then a full remote model where everyone is learning remotely, similar to what we were doing this past spring, only much more, the expectations will be much higher, which I will get into in a little bit. So the in-person learning model, as we know, the students and staff are going to follow the American Pediatric Association guidance that was released the other day. That would be a minimum of 3-foot social distancing with masks, frequent hand sanitizing, and staying home when sick, all of the proper precautions. As I mentioned in the last presentation, masks will be required for everyone except for grades pre-K to 1. Separate materials for each student. Students travel in cohorts as much as possible. Also, the teachers would move from classroom to classroom. Frequent mask breaks, particularly in warmer weather. Lunch and snack would need to be 6 foot because you no longer have the face protection, and that could occur either in the classroom or the cafeteria, but you would have to maintain that 6-foot distance. We would obviously provide special accommodations for staff or students who are not able to come to school. It's going to depend on the situations, and we're working very closely with Colby right now on what that would look like. And anyone that would be on a bus would have to wear masks regardless of age. So the advantages, obviously, is that everyone can return back to school, both students and staff. The disadvantages of this plan is that it is most likely going to require additional staffing for lunch coverage, classroom coverage, for overflow rooms, and we're also seeing that in order to have our staff, particularly specialists, art, music, going from room to room, they would need some time in between to get from room to room. We don't have the staffing levels to be able to do that model. So we would need additional specialist staff as well. Because we're not going to be able to put everyone in the same room, and we're not going to be able to move those students around. The staff are going to be moving to the different rooms. If the 3-foot requirement is changed to a greater number, we're not going to be able to do this model due to the lack of classroom space in each school. So if the guidelines change to back to a 6-foot minimum, we would not be able to do this because we do not have enough spaces to put all of the students. And you saw in the chart that Gail presented that if you go to a 6-foot distance, the numbers are essentially cut in half from the 3-foot for the number of students. Finding substitute coverage could be a challenge. We had shortages prior to the pandemic of substitute coverage, and so that's going to be a concern. And if there is a second wave or increased infection rate, we would need to go back to a remote model. So those would be the disadvantages of the in-person model that we're currently working on. The hybrid model, as we know, is a combination of remote and in-person. Essentially, the way it would work is your entire pre-K-12 population would be divided into 2 cohorts, A and B. Half the students would be in A, half the students would be in B, and then cohort A would be in person for a set amount of time, while cohort B is remote, and then vice versa. And this would allow to have more distancing of students in classrooms. There may be certain students that will stay full-time remote or full-time in person based on needs. And the same with staff. And then every effort would be made in this model to keep siblings on the same schedule. So there's 2 potential options that we're looking at more carefully. And a lot of this is based on the first round of survey results as we start to narrow down our analysis. The first one is called the Palo Alto model, which is more of a during the week model where you would have 2 days per week. Say Monday, Tuesday would be in person for cohort A, and cohort B would be remote. Wednesday would be a remote day for everyone, and you could do extensive training, extensive cleaning, training, additional support for at-risk students on that day. And then Thursday, Friday, the groups would flip-flop. So cohort B would be in person, and cohort A would be remote. The other model that's a potential option is the 1 week in person, 1 week remote. So what that would look like is cohort A would be in person, cohort B would be remote, and then they would flip-flop in week 2. And again, there may be remote for everyone throughout those weeks to allow for cleaning, training, and additional support for at-risk students. Those are the types of things that our subcommittees are looking at right now, and how this would be scheduled and what that would look like. So certainly the advantages of this hybrid model is you have continuity of learning in person. There will be dedicated days for staff for extra cleaning, training, professional learning, and providing additional support. The remote days would help with curbing infection rates. And students are separated physically further because you have less kids in the building. Certainly the disadvantages, if you have less days of in-person learning, students with disabilities may have reduced access to inclusion. Families would need to acquire childcare And the middle and high school schedules would need to be changed because they're on 6 and 7 day cycles right now. So that would look different. And then the final option that we have to create a plan for is remote learning. And in this option, as we know, all students would be placed entirely in a remote setting, very similar to what we did this spring. However, it would look much different. The schedule would be more structured, so there would be periods during the day. There would be more daily synchronous and asynchronous learning. You would have grading and assessments along with required attendance. You'd have project-based with additional online curriculum tools, and you heard Chris talk about a lot of those tools tonight. And there will be more consistency in grade level teaching, learning platform, and expectations. All of these things came up as concerns in the first survey that we sent out to parents and staff. So certainly the advantages for this is more time for instruction, reducing the exposure risk for all students and staff, and it would eliminate stops and starts because if there's a second wave, everyone is already remote. And then the disadvantages, potential equity issues with food, technology, internet access. But you can see, as Gail talked about, we're doing a lot of things to try to mitigate those as much as possible, to prepare ourselves with hotspots and additional laptops and the way we're approaching the food distribution, all of those things. Some students in this model, as we learned in the spring, are going to experience social and emotional health issues. It is challenging for younger students, and parents need to return to work. And those are all disadvantages. So as you can see, what's happening right now is we're sifting through these three models and what it would look like in Reading, and what the needs would be to make the model work for our school. And at some point, we're going to be getting forms from DESE to create these plans and submit these plans and post them on the website, our website, for everyone to see.
John, how's the on the cohort option, cohort A, I think cohort B?
Yep.
Isn't that going to require a lot more staffing? How are you going to, how's the teacher going to teach to the remote students at the same time as the in-person students?
So
am I misunderstanding that?
No. That's a great question, Chuck. And those are some of the things that we're researching and sifting out right now. I had a really good
yeah, I mean, we're already going. We're halfway to August. I mean, we got to be mindful of the quality of who we're hiring too. We can't just rush out and hire a bunch of teachers to be able to, you know, satisfy that need, right? So
yes, and so no, that's okay. So that's certainly, those are the types of things we're looking at. So I had a very good conversation with two of our principals today on scheduling, and at the end of the conversation, we all realized that at the level that we were talking about, we would not require additional staffing. A lot of it is going to depend on the type of schedule that we develop, and it will look different at different levels. So it's easier to probably do a hybrid model at an elementary or middle school versus a high school. And so those are the types of things that we're working on.
So I know there's other questions. I just have one last thing. So the MASS, that's the Mass Association of School Superintendents. I'm assuming that there's going to be a lot of, I mean, I'd be interested to hear what kind of information you get back from what other towns are doing. Is that,
Yes, we absolutely can do that, and I will tell you that we are on weekly phone calls, all of us,
Yeah.
with our different groups. People are not, I would say we're further in a lot of areas than other districts right now in the planning.
and then just finally, the remote one, the all remote one, is that, does that contemplate Zoom or some combination of Zoom and Teams?
Well, Zoom would be your video conferencing tool. That would be one, yes.
Sean had a question, and then Aaron.
Thanks, Chuck. John, on the first slide around the hybrid model, it says every effort would be made to keep siblings on the same schedule. I had one of those conversations we all have now where you're standing on the sidewalk talking to somebody standing at the top of their driveway. And this family has, I think, a second and a fourth grader. And they actually expressed that they would have a preference for the opposite because one of the parents, I think, stays at home. And so I don't know if there's any opportunity to maybe give families an opportunity to express a preference. Because the sense that I got is that their preference would be, let me have one kid at home at a time so that I can better support the remote learning for that child.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Sean. I misspoke. I was going under the assumption that people would want their kids on the same cycle, but maybe some do not for that very reason. So we would certainly ask that information in advance. Yes.
Great. Thanks.
And Aaron had a question.
Yeah, just a few questions. So piggybacking on what Chuck was saying about if we end up in a hybrid model where there's cohort A and cohort B, are you envisioning that teachers are teaching the same curriculum twice? So they're teaching it to cohort A and then they're teaching it again to cohort B? Or is there any scenario in which when cohort A is learning remotely, they're watching some of what cohort B is getting so that there can be more of a continuation of learning? Is that possible at all?
The short answer is yes, but those are the types of things we're looking at.
Okay. I'm particularly thinking of
here's what we don't want to do. We don't want to burn out our teachers, and we don't want to teach only half the curriculum. So we've got to find the right balance to do it right.
Okay, that's sort of what I'm getting at. And then you didn't mention this in your slide, but if we end up at any point in the year in a full remote model, is it still possible that our highest needs students would be in person?
So thank you. What I should have mentioned, I'll back up one step before I answer that question. So for the hybrid model, and this actually came out in the guidance today as well.
I thought I saw that.
Yeah, our higher risk students would be in person all the time.
Okay.
To answer your second question, it would depend. If we're fully remote, it's because we've had a second wave. So it wouldn't be safe for anyone to be in school in person.
Okay.
That would be the reason, I would assume, why we would be remote.
Okay. Okay. And whatever happens, this will be at all 3 levels of our schools?
You mean the model that we choose?
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And the only reason why I hesitate, Erin, is I never know what the state's going to say. I would assume that it would be the same model for all 3 levels. Yes.
Okay. I'm just asking because I have a harder time wrapping my head around like how this works with a high school schedule versus how it works with an elementary schedule. So
yeah, the high school may look more, for a hybrid, may look more departmental. So you'll have certain departments in on certain days. I mean, those are all things that we need to work out
Okay.
It will be easier at the middle school because of the team structure. And I think the elementary, we could also figure it out because it's more self-contained. I think high school will be the biggest challenge. I agree, from a scheduling standpoint.
Okay. And then, Chuck, if it's okay, my last question.
Sure.
Just listening to all of this, I definitely feel like I would hope that we would meet before the end of August. So I'm just wondering, John.
Yeah, no, I was having the same thought.
Yeah,
So
like
we'll
based on when you think you're getting information, when do you think a good time would be that you would have a more concrete update for us?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm more than happy to, I mean, my guess is we, just based on what we're hearing from Desi, is that we're going to get some really concrete final guidance at the end of July. I mean, as you could see, we're working, a lot of work is going into all three. So we'll be ready to do more information and presentation in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe we can look at the calendar for the week of maybe like the week of the 27th or something, or the week of.
Chuck, you may want to go to the first week in August only because,
The week of August 3rd.
yeah, if we're not getting final guidance until July 31st, I don't want to present one thing and then the next week it changes.
Yeah. So we can get back on that, but I mean, I was thinking the same thing. We need to meet more than just August 12th for a retreat, or August 13th for a retreat. Tom, did you have a question?
Yeah, more of a statement, I guess, than a question based on some press conversations with Dr. Doherty. Aaron, your question about the hybrid model and watching and learning at the same time, both remote and in person, that's where
You're on mute, Tom. You're frozen.
He froze.
I think he froze. We're having a rough night tonight.
Check 1, 2.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Can you-
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me try that again. So apologies, first of all, for that. What I was trying to say is I think the hybrid model that Aaron was asking about and remote and in-person learning was definitely something I was concerned about as well, both from the burnout perspective that John raised, as well as, the continuity of learning. When you think about it, essentially it means that we're going to have to convert each and every one of our classrooms to a video conference room to do that. Because you're going to need a video conference camera on top of the teacher. And to engage in learning, you probably need to have microphones around the room so other kids speak up, you can hear and stuff like that. So I think it would be admirable. I'd love to be able to do it. But I think when we're doing back of the envelope numbers, we're talking about 600,000 to 2 million to do something like that, which is no small chunk of change. But if that's what we decide. You're
also assuming that you can do it with one teacher. I don't think that's going to be doable. It's not.
There's a lot to that. Exactly. A lot to that to try and make it work. But this whole thing is complicated and the staff is trying to figure it all out. And obviously there's a lot of moving parts. So I think I'm on the same page from a meeting perspective, August 6th, August 13th, maybe August 27th, some combination thereof, not all three. But I appreciate the work, and there's a lot going on there.
Thank you. Anything else? It was a good presentation, John, and everyone. That was a lot. Obviously, a lot's been going on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So I picked up, I think I saw 3 emails for public input. Were there more, or?
I have the same 3.
Chuck, was there any, I know there was one last night that didn't have a name attached to it. Was there any follow-up on that one?
The person got back to me with a name, and I responded to that. I'm not telling you who it is. I don't have it right in front of me. I responded, it's a woman. I responded back to her that I would and I sent her a copy of our school committee policy. I don't have it. I'm sorry. Hold on. Under our school committee policy, under governance and open meeting, or not open, public comment, that is, we'd be happy to, she wanted to join our meeting, and I said we'd be happy to read it, but she would need to redact any mention of school individuals, which she hasn't gotten back to me yet. So that was last night. I don't think it's appropriate that, and we have a policy on that, I'm happy to read what she has to say, but not with the name of a school committee member, and I don't think that goes in against our policy. And I don't have that policy right. I cut and pasted the policy and sent it to her. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. I wanted to make sure we had the right starting point. So
it was Sarah Martinez on Washington Street, and I sent her a copy of our policy BEDH, public participation in policies, and I specifically asked her to refer to section section 6, which is speakers may offer objective criticism of school operations programs and concern them, but will not hear any personal complaints of school personnel nor any member of the school community. So she's happy to put whatever I just wanted her to redact any name of personnel, that's all. And I haven't heard back from her, but I'll follow up again, so. Sorry. Tom, did you want to, or does someone want to read one of these? So we have one from, they came in, I have them in order from Jeffrey Coram.
I have him as second, but I can read him first if you want me to. I have
Yeah.
Linda Snow as Snow.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, Linda Snow. So go ahead, you can read Linda's.
Okay. Public comment from Linda Snow Doxer titled OML Violations Built into the New Policy. Hello, I am confused. In the past, SC members were legally not allowed to see responses to emails received before the packet was published and public. How is it different for SC members to publish their opinions on social media where all SC members could possibly see those thoughts related to their deliberations? Also, SC members should be reminded that it's not permitted to speak to all school committee members before a meeting. This is a violation of OML. Sequential communication beyond quorum is not allowed. Thank you for revisiting this policy. It's problematic for reasons just discussed tonight. Linda Snow Doxer, Beaver Road.
Okay. Do you want me to, I can read Jeffrey's. This is from Jeffrey Corm on Ridge Road. I think the social media coordinators should not try to address any controversial issues by posts to social media. I think the response to controversial issues should be, this is a difficult issue and we invite you to listen to the full discussion of the meeting and at the meeting on such and such date. If this does not address your concern, please contact the school committee by email or the next meeting. Yeah. And we had one from Allison Starnes. Did someone want to read that? Or?
I can read that one. So this is from Allison Starnes on South Street. Dear school committee, I'm sitting at home watching the meeting, and one thing John Parks mentioned earlier strikes to another issue. The school committee voted to support the rally, a rally where a large number of people walked through our town, some social distancing, the vast majority not. Our town has opened up outside dining where 6 people can eat together. Also, the state and Board of Health are okay with kids playing softball together with what appears to be any size audience watching. In a few weeks, our students can graduate with only 2 family members present. How is that acceptable? I have contacted Ms. Boynton, who said that the Board of Health are being strict on this issue, but not so strict that the rally, etc., can take place. Even high school graduation guidelines from DPH and HHS to help prevent the spread of COVID-19 is not prescriptive with numbers. When my family moved here from Ireland, I knew that graduations and celebrations would be difficult. We are a family of 4, myself, my husband, my incoming RMHS sophomore, and my graduating senior, and so don't have the support network that most have. I now have to watch my child graduate whilst leaving the only other family member at home, where he can apparently watch it on RCTV. How can that be fair, and what can you do to rectify this? So, Chuck, I think should we not be reading the one from 6/17 from Caitlin Mercurio?
I missed that one.
It's not school committee related.
Yeah, that's regarding a town meeting vote. I can respond to her in writing. If that's all right with the committee. Does anybody have an objection to that, or? No. I know Caitlin. So. Is that, Aaron, you said there's 4. Was that the 4th?
Yeah, I just meant that we had received 4 messages since the packet came out, so.
Okay. John, I know we don't usually immediately respond to public input. You know, we bring it up at a later date, but I don't know. Do we need to meet with the board? I don't want to step on anybody's toes that anybody's doing is already done, and I know Kate's working her tail off to make this a great event for the families, and I don't want to get in the way of that. But you know, the Board of Health is, you know, there's been some other, just leave it with other groups in town trying to get things through there, and I don't know, just, is it worth a meeting or not?
I think it's more than just the Board of Health, Chuck. I mean, I would, this is the planning of graduation is at the purview of the high school principal, and it's always been.
I understand that, but if we went to the high school principal and said we met with the Board of Health and you can now have 2 more family members, I'm sure she's not going to object, John. That's all I'm saying.
Chuck,
I'm not trying to plan the graduation for.
Well, it is, because she's put the whole plan together based on this setup.
Yeah.
You would not be able to do this on Turf 1. You'd have to find a new venue, and we would have to figure out how to socially distance people. There's a lot of logistics involved, and a lot of time and effort has gone into this graduation plan. And we followed the guidelines that were given to us by the department. And we asked the question again today, if they were going to relax the graduation requirements, and they said no, because even though they're going to 3 feet in the fall, the 6 foot still stands right now, because we're still in the summer.
All right. Okay. What else? We have the reorg. We can do that tonight or not do it. It's up to the committee. It's on the agenda, so.
I think it should be tonight.
Okay. Are we good for time here?
Yeah, you got 15 minutes.
Okay, so the gavel goes over to John.
The virtual gavel. So I'm following policy BDA, which was in your packet. The way this works is the first part of the process is that there is a nominations for chair, and then once the nomination and election for the chair is held, then the virtual gavel will go back to that chair, and then you'll choose a vice chair. So what I need to do first is take nominations for the office of chair from the floor. So at this point, I'll take any nominations for chair.
I nominate Tom.
That was Sean, right? Sean, you raised your hand?
Yeah, no, if he'll do it again, I'd like to nominate Chuck.
Okay, Carla?
We'll make it interesting. I'll nominate Tom.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations from the floor? Okay. So I'm going to do a roll call vote. And you would, I guess I do one at a time, right? I guess that's probably the
I've
better
been doing it since April. You ought to know.
No, I guess we would do one nomination at a time. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
So we'll
I'm
start.
sorry.
We'll start first with Chuck. So we'll do a roll call vote. Erin?
Aye.
John Parks?
Aye.
Sean Brandt?
Aye.
Tom?
It's aye.
I know.
Yeah, it's the
Chuck?
best thing for Chuck. It's the best thing for the
Aye.
committee.
Okay. And Chuck?
I guess I. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Congratulations, Chuck. I hand it back over to you.
Okay. I'd like to take thank you. You know, as I said, it's a first among equals, so we got a lot to do. So I'd like to take nominations for vice chair.
I think it's like Sean raised his hand.
Sean, did
Yeah,
you?
I'll nominate Tom for vice chair. Yeah, I did. I'll nominate Tom for vice chair.
Any other nominations? Okay, close the nominations. Carla,
Aye.
Sean, Aye. Aaron,
Aye.
John. John,
Aye. Sorry, mute.
Chuck, aye. Tom,
Aye.
thank you, congratulations. I think that's it. Been a
That is
long
all the
night.
business, sir. Yes.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
The second, Aaron,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Sean. Aye. Carla,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Chuck, aye. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, good night.